Buddy, thank you all for coming to public hearings this evening, November 3rd, 2021. I just want to see, I know municipal regs are over here. Anybody from municipal regs, regulations, if you could somehow sit over here, you can socially distance over here if you don't mind, so Carolyn Campbell can just make sure there's a quorum. Municipal operations, you got two? Anybody else from municipal operations? Three? If you can sit over here somewhere, I appreciate it. And we're looking for intergovernmental relations. All right, so Aghavan, you take care of your committee. 1, 2, 3, 4. Looks like you have a quorum. I apologize for the delay. We had to take care of some difficulties, technical difficulties with noticing at the town hall. We pretty much opened the public hearing there and recessed to this location. So we're going to continue the public hearings at this location, Stoughton High School Auditorium. So thank you for your understanding. We'll be with you momentarily.
We're going to get started in about 5-10 minutes while the other committees reorganize. Thank you.
We do have copies of the agenda if anybody wants a copy. Copy of the agendas are available up here. We just need about 10 minutes for the standing committees, municipal operations, municipal regulations, and intergovernmental relations. You doing that now? Great. Take your time. And once they're done, we will reconvene with the public hearing. All right, we have good news. The standing committees that have a quorum have reorganized. Congratulations to the chairs, secretaries, and other officers. We appreciate your effort and time and commitment. I should say, contributing your time and effort to the town of Stoughton. We appreciate your commitment. All right, I'm going to turn it over to the chair of the Finance Committee to run the meeting. And the only thing we ask is to be kind to each other. Hopefully there won't be any arguments or fist fights this evening. I'll have to step in and break it up, send you to your respective corners. And this is Vaughn Enochian. Mr. Enochian, please take it away. Thank you.
We're going to return from recess on this here. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If each of the standing committees would like to open their meetings too, we can continue.
Hi. The municipal regulations public hearing is reconvening after the recess from Town Hall.
Intergovernmental Relations Committee is reconvening after a brief recess from Town Hall.
Thank you.
Okay, do I hear a motion to open a public hearing?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, before we open the public hearing, just to make note that on the agenda, you will see that Article 9 was on the agenda, and that was from an earlier guess at what was coming. Article 9 has not been assigned to anybody, so Article 9 is not part of the open hearings. And now, Mr. Chairman, with that caveat, I'll move to open the public hearing.
Do I have a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Okay, we're going to start with Article 5, which is funding of the South School Feasibility Study. Do we have a presentation? Good evening, Dr. Rabb and Madam Chairperson, Chairwoman Groby.
It's not on, Dr. Not on.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you. We're requesting that the revised motion be added to the special town meeting warrant this evening. Bond counsel revealed a clerical error subsequent to the vote back in the spring, and we're asking that the original motion be corrected by the revised motion. And so the requested appropriation remains the same at $750,000. And this appropriation allows the South Building Committee to begin the feasibility study process, hire an owner's project manager and a designer. And so respectfully request your consideration for the reconsideration of the vote.
Do you have anything further, or is that everything? Okay. Do we have any questions or comments from the Finance Committee? Mr. Lurie?
How you doing? Thank you. Through you, Vaughn. Thank you for coming. I'm pleased to see that you're able to get this off the ground. It'd be exciting to see the feasibility committee come out with a terrific idea for not only the students in that area of the town, but possibly even more than just that. Because of all the property you have who knows where this could go. But I look forward to seeing that. And my question is really, will you be able to steer that committee, the feasibility group, to think about keeping the cost in line so that we don't have to come up with a project that's so expensive that we have to think as an override as a project funding source as a first choice, where if we have to go to an override, so be it. But at least we exhaust all revenue sources before going to that.
Thank you, sir. At this point, what the feasibility study will do is allow the town to assess all options. So it would be premature for me to really talk about funding sources at this point, but what the feasibility study does through a very rigorous MSBA process is it allows the town to take a look at all the options available to it, but it doesn't go into the borrowing or the funding source at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any other questions or comments from the Finance Committee? Any comments from intergovernmental regulations? Questions or comments? Would you like to step up to the microphone, please?
I'm sorry. Oh,
Would you please explain the funding source for this?
thank you so much for the question. I spoke to the town manager earlier in the week, and she assured me that this $750,000 was available for borrowing from the town, previously approved at town meeting.
Do we have any other questions from intergovernmental regulations? Do we have any questions from municipal operations? Any questions or comments? Cynthia Walsh?
This is Howie Hanson height. Thank you. Cynthia Walsh, 1096 Park Street. I'm the chair of municipal operations. And, Mr. Chair, the good news is we do have a quorum now.
Well, thank you.
Is part of the feasibility study the fact that we have the same number of schools as we've had for 50 years and half the student population? So why do we need to replace a school that only has about 230 kids in it? Is that part of the study?
The study really looks at all options.
I hope you can hear me. So the study is to look at all options. We did talk a little bit about the Wilkins Elementary as another elementary school that we brought forward to the select board to talk about an SOI, so we put that forward. I'm sorry, my mask is like a little too tight here. Hold on. So we did put through an SOI for the Wilkins as a potential. We're going to look at the possibility of not merging schools, but redistricting. So the school has about 350 students currently, and the projections are going up. I know that I saw the projections from Dr. Ab, but we did bring this up at the last town meeting.
The two schools together currently have 519 students in them, and we're looking at all options to really make sure that we maximize every dollar.
Yeah. I know I was a teacher at the Edwin A. Jones School when it was closed, and the student population was spread around basically two other schools. And parents aren't happy when their local school is gone. Although it's not gone, it's still a school, and there's still kids there. We've renamed it an early childhood education center. I just wonder if we're not overbuilding. Especially the South School area is pretty well developed. There's one development that's almost finished. And there's not a lot of high, dry land in that area. I went to the South School. So I know it's an old school. And it had design flaws in it on the very first day, because I was in the very first class. My teacher was Helen Hansen, who now has a school named after her. I just hope that the feasibility study really studies. There's a limit to how much we can afford. We're going to be paying for this building for another 15 years, 14? And there's another project for the town. And there's a question about how long or how much can we take. This is one of the most senior communities in this part of Massachusetts as far as the age of the population. There are actually more seniors in Stoughton than there are children. And I don't see that really changing because housing in Stoughton is very, very expensive. You can either buy a house or have kids, but it's very, very hard to do both. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions or comments from municipal operations? I see a hand over there. Would you like to come down to the microphone? Jim Guerin, please identify yourself for the record.
Jim Guerin, Precinct 6, Municipal Operations. This is going to be built under the auspices of the MSBA, I take it.
Yes.
How long, once this feasibility study is done, is it going to take for the MSBA to make a determination? And is there any chance that we don't wait for the MSBA if it takes too long?
In my experience, the MSBA process is very rigorous, and typically, start to finish, these processes are from 3 to 4 years, as you saw with the high school here. But my also experience is that the MSBA really works hard to work with the town and make sure that the funding works. So I would be surprised if a town wouldn't work cooperatively with the MSBA because of the reimbursement rate that they typically give.
I've got to apologize. I don't remember the discussion last spring about this article. Is the property in question limited to the Line Lumber Road area?
So previously, we mentioned that would be the property we'd be looking at, but we would look at all property that would be available in the town. So as I mentioned, the Wilkins is an area too, or a school with a population that we'd be looking to potentially redistrict throughout the district. So it's anything that we have as town property that would be part of that discussion.
But the likelihood is going to be built on
Most likely,
line
yes.
lumber.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be less expensive for the feasibility study if we were to say line lumber is it?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. The feasibility study looks at enrollment, and they look at the number of classrooms we have as a district. So what they want to find out is make sure that we build a building that will maximize enrollment and make sure it's the most efficient building. The space is not exactly what they're looking at so much right now. Where it goes. They're more concerned right now in the feasibility study with the size of the building, the number of classrooms that we need as a town.
Personally, I don't see any likelihood that it be built anyplace else. But if it were going to be built anyplace else, that property is the best location for the fire station. It seems funny to me to hey, stand back. We're gonna take our time doing this thing here. I'd like to see a decision made. We're going to use the line lumber and do the feasibility study, get the study out quicker, and make the determination.
No, that's a good point. I think that it's important to note that the MSBA, they refund us a lot of money. And in
I'm
order
sorry,
to
you
do,
speak very fast.
I'm sorry, this is a new mask, so it's like really tight. Sorry. No, I don't want to pull it down, but thank you. So the MSBA, their process, it's rigorous. but they do provide us a lot of funding to build these buildings. So this feasibility study, what we're moving forward with, is to look at not just replacing the south, but what's the potential based on our master facilities, master plan for the schools, on what we can do that's bigger in that spot. So again, talking about redistricting, what that's going to look like. Dr. Abd mentioned when you merge the two schools, it's a large number of students. There's also going to be organic growth that comes with that. When you build a new high school, more students come. We've seen an increase this year alone. We didn't see as big of an increase during COVID because of COVID, but now we're starting to see a large influx of students at the high school. So with the elementary schools, if you build it, they will come. So it's kind of a similar aspect. So at this time, we're working through the MSBA process. We're not dragging our feet. The MSBA is not dragging their feet. It's a process so that we can get as much funding as we can and take the burden off the taxpayers.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions or comments from municipal operations? We can announce that, yes. This meeting is being recorded by SMAC for future presentation and for tonight's viewing and can be shown live. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Do we have any more questions from municipal operations or comments? Do we have any other questions and comments from the Finance Committee at this point? Okay, quick one.
Yeah, just a quick question through you, Vaughn. Is there a list of the names of people who are going to be on the committee already, or is that something yet to be determined? Maybe
No, the committee's been established as part of the process with the MSBA.
Okay, so where is that list?
I have it. I can share it. I don't have it with me tonight.
Okay.
We have a new Stoughton Public School website. Everybody should check it out. It's great. School committee page is fabulous. But we have a page that we're putting up for the South School Building Committee, and all the names will be listed on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Do we have any questions, comments from the public? Carolyn Campbell.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Campbell, 64 Chisholm Road. I just have a comment about the South School and the use of the line lumber property. I was on the school committee when the school committee voted to redistrict the Jones School and convert it from an elementary school to a preschool or early education center. And at that time, we had looked at either closing the South or the Jones. And while the South School, and this was back in, 2001 or 2002, the South School was already in dire conditions then. It was determined that the Jones School it was better to redistrict from the Jones, because if we closed the South School, we were going to incur increased transportation costs for busing all the students. We're required, the schools are required by state law to bus all students K through 6 that live 2 miles from the school. Given that part of the town and the neighborhoods that school serves, any other school in town is going to be more than 2 miles. So it's likely, even though they have to go through the feasibility study, that there's going to need to be an elementary school in that part of the town, or we're going to have increased transportation costs on a yearly basis. Thank you.
Can I ask any other comments from the public? Okay, thank you.
Do we have any other questions for anyone, public, IGR, municipal ops, finance committee? Questions or comments? Thank you very much. Yeah, that's a good point. I'm going to take the next item out of order. I'd like to take Article 12, which is a petition article. I think Molly Cochran is here to present that.
presentation. The written was provided to Vaughn, I think, Sunday night, and Bob actually took care of making an additional copies. So we have a number of additional copies. This has sort of, actually, I don't know if they're stable. So
Yes, the information was emailed out.
okay.
Yes, it's been emailed out.
All right, thank you. And I do have a few extra copies for people, and I have a couple visual aids of giving. Just give me a second. Get my presentation out. Is this the best way to talk? Let me know if you can't hear me, and let me know if I talk too fast, as I have a tendency to talk too fast. Thank you to FinCom for holding this public hearing and allowing me to speak about this citizens petition. And I do want to thank every member of FinCom for all the hard work that you do on so many issues in town. I think you're probably underappreciated, but it's a tremendous responsibility that you have, and I thank you for your work. So in this citizens petition, we are asking that town meeting vote to ban single-use plastic checkout bags. So bear in mind, this is a fairly narrow ban, and I'll go over the proposed new town bylaw in a few minutes. I think that this is something, quite frankly, that addresses the tip of the iceberg of the problem that we have in the environment with plastics that are devastating our planet, but this is a really important start. So I want to talk just briefly about and I am a quick talker, so this won't take so long, past, present, and future. Let me just take one moment to talk about the past and say, those of us of a certain age will remember there actually was a time when you would go to a store and there were no plastic bags. It wasn't until 1979 that the first then single-use plastic bags started to be introduced in grocery stores. It took a while for them to catch on. There was a little resistance, but by like the 1980s, they were obviously very, very prevalent and very easy to find. And quite frankly, like with a lot of plastics, we're a little bit hooked now. It's difficult to change. But, when we think about changes to our habits and our lifestyle, we have to keep in mind history, the big picture. I personally can't help thinking about the World War II generation. Father and father-in-law, parents survived World War II. They certainly made it through life without a lot of the conveniences that we have. And they also, during the war, they came together as a country. There was gas rationing, food rationing, shortages, everything like that. But they came together. And I think that if we recall their legacy and what they achieved, that helps us deal with some of the challenges that are coming our way when we look at the environmental destruction that we're facing now. So let me talk about the present with respect to plastics. And I want to start with these things pop out at me in the newspaper all the time, but I just saw this week. This is from Morgan Stanley, which is some huge investment firm / bank, and it says more than 10 million tons of plastic waste are dumped into the ocean every year. That's unsustainable for the environment and for the global economy. So again, that's a pretty a good source of information right there. That industry, the financial sector, is starting to take a look at this problem. And so the handout that I provided to FinCom, and I appreciate you taking a look at that, showed the many sources that I have for the information I'll go over tonight. Scientific sources. I'm citing National Geographic, the Environmental Protection Agency, newspapers, and the academic findings, university findings, and things of that nature. So with respect to the amount of plastic, I'm going to go over a few bullet points really quickly, and then we'll dive into them. The reasons we may want to ban plastic bags in this town are, the use of petrochemicals, the impact on climate change, litter, even clogging storm drains, the effect on wildlife, breaking down into hazardous microplastics, and, the problem with, quite frankly, they jam up the recycling works. Let me start about the amount of plastics. Again, I give you one visual aid, but I also refer to this phenomenon that's known as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which is apparently this amazingly large garbage patch floating in the Pacific Ocean. You may have heard of it, seen pictures of it, and such and such. And apparently, according to this source, National Geographic, 80% of that plastic actually is coming from the land. It's not coming from the people who are fishermen, and that the majority of that garbage is actually plastic garbage. Let me start off with another simple concept is littering. We've all seen it. We've seen plastic bags floating in the woods, on the trees. We've seen them in ponds, lakes, waterways. It's inescapable. And the world uses like 1 trillion plastic bags each year. They're used, they're gotten rid of, they're used, they're gotten rid of, but they're not getting rid of. There is no way. They're always, always with us. And again, that amount of littering with the plastic bags does affect problems with storms, flooding, storm drainage, and things of that nature. And I think that's one of the reasons I think India is one of the next countries to ban plastic bags, but we'll get to that. So as you can imagine, this plastic being in the environment, being virtually permanent, has an amazing, devastating impact on wildlife and on biodiversity. It's been noted many times, plastic bags are found, and plastic of all sorts found in sea turtles, seabirds, seals, and fish. And once ingested, apparently, by some of these creatures, they literally starve to death because their system doesn't work anymore. And one of the last articles I put in the handout to FinCom was from a scientist who actually saw an amazing amount, tragically amazing amount, of plastic in the stomach of camels. So it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere. So as you can imagine, there's a tremendous impact, of course, on human life. We all know, of course, that what happens to marine life, what happens to impacts biodiversity, it's going to impact human survival as well. So microplastics, guess what? It's in your food chain. And I was shocked to see the article in Consumer Report this year. And the headline says, "How to Eat Less Plastic." And the quote is, "You may be consuming as much as a credit card's worth of plastic a week." And of course, they go into all the reasons for that, the continuous manufacturing of amazing amounts of plastic. So microplastics are in your food chain. And microplastics both leach out harmful chemicals that were used to make them. They're made from petroleum. And they also absorb other harmful pollutants. So the next very important reason to consider use of plastics is climate change. So I'm sure that many of us would hope that somebody was going to come along and save us from that problem before it affected our children and grandchildren. It's here right now. It's here right now. We're seeing it throughout the world with unbelievable flooding, drought, wildfires. We all saw the California wildfire or western wildfires this late summer, that the smoke reached all the way to where we live. And we had those hazy skies for a couple of days. That pollution reached all the way to where we lived. And by the way, scientists think that, more people died of COVID who were specifically in that environment in the West due to the, respiratory problems caused by those fires. So we're seeing it here. We're seeing it right now. We're seeing lives and businesses destroyed. And so we need to do something about it. It's really a situation where it's all hands on deck. Everyone needs to be aware. Everyone needs to take action. Every town needs to take action. So what's the connection between plastic bags and climate change? Well, to begin with, they are produced by extracting fossil fuels, by petroleum, and that it's in and of itself has a significant impact on the climate and on climate change. And it's believed, and I quote in one of my sources here, that there actually would be a dent in oil demand and oil production if there were less plastic used. And then specifically with respect to plastic bags, the polyethylene releases greenhouse gases as it breaks down into the environment. And it actually breaks down into ethylene and methane. And methane is certainly very well known as one of the most dangerous chemicals out there that is accelerating climate change. And as I say, it's like a vicious cycle. The more we have climate change, the more quickly it breaks down because of the heat, and then it accelerates climate change. So for all these reasons, it's not hard to imagine that plastic bags have been regulated and actually prohibited throughout the world. This actually started as far back as 2003. Denmark and Ireland started regulating the use of plastic bags to discourage their use. And as of 2019, from an article in The Economist, at least 90 countries have banned plastic bags. We know many states have banned plastic bags. And here in Massachusetts, I have a list of the towns, but 144 cities and towns have already banned single-use plastic bags. That includes Canton, Sharon, Milton, and Easton, so many of our neighbors. So, and then just to touch for a moment upon the future. This is about the future that we want for ourselves and for our children and grandchildren in our community and throughout the world. I became a member of school committee, like Carolyn was, several years ago, and I did it because I cared about the children and their future and knew they needed a rich education for their future. And we all understood that. But we're going to fail them if we leave them with a world that is just overwhelmed with what are largely preventable problems, or at least let's make those problems more manageable. So I would say of all the changes that are definitely coming our way because of climate change, as we confront these environmental problems, this is a good place to start. It's a sensible place to start. It's a small step, but hopefully it makes people think about environmental impacts, think about their choices as consumers, and equally, or if not more important, honestly, it's industry has to get the message. We want less plastic. We want our things delivered to us with less plastic. We want things manufactured with less plastic. There's other choices out there, certainly things used to be manufactured without all this, and industry needs to step up. The more we send the message as citizens that we're trying to limit plastic and we realize that it's dangerous, hopefully plastic production will start reducing instead of getting larger. So with all that in mind and all those issues in mind, I did work on drafting a proposed bylaw, which was modeled on Canton's bylaw, and I have spoken with activists in Canton as well as in Sharon, they both have some very serious environmental activists there. And again, it was drafted narrowly. It was drafted to be simple and easy to understand. It is about the single-use reusable bags as checkout bags. So if people still want their deli meat or their fish in a plastic bag, although it would be nice if the grocery stores gave you an alternative, something a little less destructive, but in any event, it doesn't address that. It's about what you take to the store to carry your groceries home with, so it certainly can be still use the brown paper bags, or you can use a reusable bag. And I think the idea was also to give people a time to get used to the new law, and certainly, Stop and Shop knows it's coming. Price Right does have the thicker bags, which are not covered by this, but Stop and Shop and all those other stores have adapted, and all CVS, of course, it's not a problem for them; they'll adapt. But for the there's a grace period for small retail establishments, a 6-month grace period for them to get adapted to that. But I think it's just a change that our neighboring towns have gotten used to. Many towns in Massachusetts, and certainly some entire states, have gotten used to that change. So that's why I'm advocating for that, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Do we have any questions or comments from anyone on the Finance Committee? Harvey Spack?
I thoroughly agree with you, but to a point. The reason plastic bags were so introduced, besides the reduction in cost to grocery stores, was the fact that we were cutting down a whole lot of trees. And as we cut down the trees, we cut down these important things to our environment, which take carbon dioxide, photosynthesis, and change it back into oxygen. And I really, don't get me wrong, I agree wholeheartedly that we're littering the heck out of the country, out of the world. But I don't see a viable alternative unless, because if you listen to any one of these paper company ads, they say, for every tree we cut down, we plant 3. Well, if you want to believe that. And how long does it take for that tree to grow to replace the one you cut down? So I don't, in my mind, I don't see a viable alternative to replacing the plastic bag with your craft paper bag that you used to have before. So I think that if our chemical engineers were to work real hard at it and design a plastic bag that would, over a period of years, dissolve, that would be our perfect answer. Currently, I see everything, and having been someone who had a boat on the water, used to see plastic bags constantly floating by, and I'd say, I wonder who threw that in the water, as are all of our plastic goods, many of them, as we know. Many things made out of plastic. But until we come up, as a people, come up with a viable alternative, I don't see paper bags as a replacement.
So just my comment to that is that, probably the best thing to do is to take your great-grandmother's, basket that somebody wove themselves and use that. And, but that's obviously not realistic, and we don't have that. Certainly there's reusable cotton bags or cloth bags made out of something. And quite frankly, I find those are just proliferate in my house, not because I go out and buy them, but because you attend an event, you make a donation, you subscribe to a magazine. Here I have a New Yorker bag, which, honest to God, I did not ask for. I don't want it. I don't even need it. But these are easy to collect, and they are sold. And even they're at Stop and Shop. They're at different places, which I think that some stores have been quietly encouraging it. Like they might have a reminder. Gee, you might want to use a reusable bag or whatever. But I think some people just need that nudge to say, you know what, really taking it away. And I absolutely agree. There's going to be an impact if people use paper bags. There's an impact from all uses of paper, which we have to be aware of and vigilant about. But I do think that, so many countries that have considered this and debated it, and their state legislatures or national legislatures have probably weighed all those options and have come to conclude that really the harm outweighs the alternatives to it.
Thank you. Thank you for the comment, Harvey. Do we have any other questions or comments from the Finance Committee? Joel Wolk.
Do you know if the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is planning to put out any type of bill that does what you want to do for the entire state?
That is a great question, and I know when I started down this path pre-COVID, many, many months before pre-COVID, that was sort of a thought on the table that, yes, there's a bill, there's been a bill for years. There's also been a bill for many, many years and many lobbying efforts for many, many years to get people to have deposits on their plastic water bottles. That hasn't even gone through. So, I mean, there's clearly forces lobbying on the other side, and/or there's, it's not a priority, or there's indifference. So I don't mean to suggest it's just lobbying. So would that be the best solution? Yes. Would national law be a good solution? Yes, but that's not going to happen. The state one might happen this year. It might happen 3 years from now. But in the interim, thousands and thousands and thousands of these bags are being produced, used.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions or comments from the Finance Committee? Diane?
Hi, thank you for the presentation. First of all, I want to say that I understand about plastic. I see it all the time. It's terrible, all of the stuff that it does. I try and keep all my stuff together and go. A colleague mentioned about paper. You mentioned cloth, which a lot of people were directed away from many years ago because they were afraid of the bacteria and stuff that was collecting in the cloth. So I don't think, as my colleague said, there is an alternative that's viable right now for plastic. But one of my biggest things right now is, how about the businesses in town? Do they know this is coming? We just came out of a pandemic where we had a lot of small mom and pop stores barely survive, and now we're going to turn around and tell them that they can't use these bags. That, to me, I don't think this is the right time to do this.
Well, I think everything that's done with the environment has been done years or decades too late, and this is one of the things to do it. And it's never going to be convenient if somebody finds that, the easiest way to provide packaging. I think it's also just like a lifestyle change where people, as I have for many years, been bringing bags when I go to the mall, when I go shopping, and if you forget, sometimes it's like you have 1 or 2 or 3 items, you grab the receipt and you walk it out to your car. And you get used to saying to people, no bag, please, I have my own bag. So I think that's part of it. I think, again, we have built in for those smaller stores, which, trust me, we're very concerned about, and I really want to support. It's very important for the town to support them, to give them time to get used to it. I think again, to a certain extent, people should be getting in the habit of having their own bag, whether it's a really heavy-duty plastic bag that they use for years and years or whatever it might be. But I don't think it's going to sink or swim the small businesses. And I actually am kind of been paying attention to one of the businesses in town that I like to, very little food-related business, and I've noted that they don't use plastic bags. They get you your goods in another way. So there are alternatives, just like, you know, again, before 1980, there were small businesses and people were able to, you know, survive without the plastic.
Right. Thank you. Do we have any other questions or
Fawn,
comments?
just one more. I mean, the one thing, do they know this is coming? You said something about Stop and Shop, but do the rest of the businesses in town know this is coming?
I don't know, you know, not necessarily. It's not going to really be too much of a shock in the sense that it's been circulating through Massachusetts for many years. But like I say, there is a 6-month sort of grace period for the small businesses. So I think that's fair warning for them.
Okay. Did that answer your question, Diane? Mark, Struck?
How does the Board of Health feel about this? And I know that they're enforcing it. What is the increase on man hours and all that
No,
that you're projecting?
Certainly, I'd actually want to do, I have not yet, and I do want to present it to the Board of Selectmen, and I'm sure those are really good questions. I think, you know, the most important thing for the Board of Health is not enforcement of the plastic bag ban right now, while COVID is still there. But I think that's, again, I think this is, again, similar to the way it was developed in Canton as far as the enforcement. Hopefully it will be mostly a self-enforcing law after the first year or so. People will get used to it, and people, those bags will be phased out. I can't imagine that it's going to, like I say, it's certainly not going to be a top priority while we're going through the pandemic, and people are not. I'm sure that the town manager is going to make good decisions as to, you know, enforcing that and what amount of time is spent enforcing that. But again, I think it's just like a cultural shift change, as opposed to, we don't want to go around fining people, really. We just want to say, oh, you know, were you aware of this law? If you're not, you know, please do this instead. And, you know, that's what we're looking for.
On that note, and kind of piggyback off of her, where you haven't reached out to the Board of Health or any of the small businesses, like you said, in a pandemic being affected with this, shouldn't this be held off until the annual town meeting and not a special town meeting?
I think the matter is urgent, quite frankly, and this was going to be an entire year ago, but, you know, maybe it was my own fault that I didn't really feel that I could get this done during the first most scary year of COVID. So it's certainly been on my mind and on my agenda for a very, very long time as to sort of stopping the destruction as soon as we can. I think, you know, obviously if that's how town meeting feels, that's how town meeting feels. But, you know, hopefully, you know, we'll get the discussion going. You know, part of this is just raising awareness so people are thinking about it and thinking about compliance and sort of the cultural shift.
Thank you, and I commend you for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Jess Minor?
Hi. I just wanted to thank you also for bringing this forward and stepping out and taking the time to put this together. I think it's an excellent idea. I think it really is about the culture shift that needs to happen, and largely that's with the consumers themselves. And I don't think anybody wants to see businesses punished, but typically what happens is the responsibility and the cost is shifted onto the consumer by the business anyway. It's a small amount, but the bags will be offered. It'll be offered for sale at a price, and the customer can choose to purchase them. And then after they've purchased them so many times, they start to realize it's time to bring my own so I don't keep buying these. So I don't think it's going to negatively affect businesses in any way. I don't think there's any time to waste, and I don't think that there's a reason to not push this forward immediately. Large cities, as I lived in Austin at the time this went through, and they were able to pull it off very successfully, and there was a 75% reduction within 2 years of single-use plastic bag in litter composition after they put it through. So I think that there's a lot of positives here. I think it's not going to take very long for people to realize they can bring their reusable bags, and I think it will be a successful effort if we can get behind it. and hopefully help move the whole state in that direction. It's kind of surprising Massachusetts isn't
Yeah.
a leader in this area.
It is, yeah.
So, thank you.
Somebody must be like, but, and one of the things I just wanted to comment is, and certainly we're happy to discuss, with change of habits, change of lifestyle. I mean, look at all the change of habits that we've had. Like, everybody in this room's got a mask. We all remember to leave our house with a mask. It was hard to do that at first, and we forgot, or we, try to leave extra in a car. It's the same thing. And I will also say, like, there was a time when you left your house without the phone, and then you had to learn that new habit, and you had to learn to charge your phone and all these kinds of things. So we're certainly capable of adapting, even though, it might be a little bumpy for some people. Thank you for your support.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions or comments from the Finance Committee? Oh, Eric Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm the new guy. I just think my goal is to not make myself look stupid. But thank you, Molly, for the presentation. And I also commend you, just like everyone else. And I share the sense of urgency about it. But as Diane was indicating, there is a lot to be said for investing the time in getting the buy-in from the multitude of stakeholders affected and not merely the climate activists. So if it is possible to take the time to have more positive and proactive buy-in from the business community and the Board of Health before this is put before the town, I certainly think that would ensure its success to a greater degree. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. I appreciate
Thank you, Mr.
those
Chairman.
thoughts.
Thank you, Molly.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions or comments from members of the Finance Committee? You, Mr. Lurie. Mr. Lurie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you, and thank you for the presentation. I appreciate it. I think if I could sum it up, you could tell me yes or no if this kind of sums it up, is that you don't like plastic in general, and that plastic bags are like low-hanging fruit, that we could start to get rid of plastic, starting with plastic bags. Does that kind of...
I think that was a good way to put it. Thank you. It is the low-hanging fruit. It is the low-hanging fruit, yes.
That, in a nutshell, that would say?
Yes.
Okay. Well...
I wouldn't say I don't like plastic. I would say reality, scientific reality, nature doesn't like plastic. It's not about
I'm kind of
me.
nostalgic. I miss the days where I got to play with metal Tonka trucks and erector sets, and everything seems to go plastic. So I kind of miss those days, but it's more like a nostalgic thing. But I just wondered if you thought through the law of unintended consequences with the behavior of people. Like, on one hand, you're disappointed at the behavior of people who let plastic kind of fly around into the neighborhoods and trees and all that. But on the other side of it, isn't there a huge constituency of people who actually use plastic as a way to recycle? In other words, today you would have, if you were to get rid of all the plastic bags, you wouldn't have a way to line the trash cans inside your home. You'd have to go and buy plastic, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you have to go buy plastic bags from the store to replace the plastic you can't use as a recycler yourself?
Okay, first of all, single thin-use plastic bags do not recycle well. They jam up recycling machines. But if you're talking about how somebody might use that bag in their home for their tiny trash cans, I mean, this has nothing to do with the big kitchen garbage can bags, right? It has nothing to do with that.
I'm talking about the
right?
average
So
trash
it's just,
can.
if somebody uses those for the little ones, all I can say is, I don't want to get into people's personal habits, but I've never done that in my life. You can buy trash cans that have lids on them. You can do whatever. If you want to wash out your trash can, if you want to spray it with bleach, which is also not good for the environment. It's, unless you work in a hospital or something like that, it's one of those unnecessary uses of plastic that people might use them for because they have them and it seems to make sense, or it's convenient. Not saying it's not convenient if you feel the need to do that with all your trash cans. But there are many people who don't do that with their trash cans.
Right, but you're okay with people going to buy plastic bags?
No, I'm not okay with people going to buy
to
plastic
replace-
bags. I don't think they'll do that. I think, maybe some people will if they have a strong desire. They could also buy compostable bags, quite frankly. They're out there on the marketplace. There's many different marketplaces that are trying to rethink and recreate all sorts of, personal items, household items, and compostable bags. So yes, people can go find those, or if people want to go buy more plastic, they can. It's about changing the bulk of the behavior. I can't control if somebody is extremely wed to that or has a particular need that they feel the need to go and buy that plastic bag. and put it in their little trash
Well,
cans and
yeah,
throw it
but
out once a
you
week.
could see you could see the dilemma. If you're depending on those grocery bags to line your trash, you now lose those. You now have to go buy them instead. So you're buying plastic that you otherwise would have recycled.
So what I'm actually saying is I understand that that is what some people might do. I don't see it as a dilemma, given that we're trying to, we're trying to reduce plastic. We're trying to reduce manufacturers making plastic and having it in the environment. It is to be hoped that people would reconsider whether they need that much, if there's another way that they can take care of their household trash without having to buy additional plastic. And I can't control if some people want to do that, but I just think it's unnecessary. It's also about the whole concept of rethinking what clean is, whether it's the products you use that are incredibly damaged to the environment because of what's in those products, and the people who sell them, Procter & Gamble doesn't care, whether that's going to increase, whether it's your landscaping products and everything. The manufacturers don't care, but people feel like they need to use certain things, and then you might rethink, is it really worth the damage to the environment to do this, even though I grew up doing it this way or whatever, and in my house we didn't grow up putting little plastic bags in our garbage. So that's not used to it.
You good, Dave? Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions or comments from the Finance Committee? Seeing none, do we have any questions or comments from intergovernmental regulations? Yes, Janice?
Okay. First of all, thank you for doing this.
Could you please identify yourself for the record?
I'm sorry?
Could you please identify yourself for the record?
Janice Schneider, 82 Ethel Way. First of all, thank you very much for doing this. I think it's a great idea, and I completely support it. My question is, you modeled this on Canton's bylaw?
Yes.
Did you have town council review it for any issues that he may see before it comes before us?
No, that's a great question. In fact, there have been a lot of great questions and suggestions. So my plan would be, and was slowed down a little bit by the fact that I can't walk. My plan would be to try to present it to the Board of Selectmen, and then obviously talk to the Board of Health would be a great idea, but also talk to, and now I'm forgetting what your question was, but somebody else at the town about having town council, yes, have town council review it. One of the issues that I had was I couldn't find in the bylaws what, if anything, where we would be putting it. We're not amending anything, but where would we be putting it? And I ended up, I believe I talked to somebody who was like, well, we don't, it's going to go someplace wherever it addresses waste. But absolutely right, town council should make sure that, give a recommendation, quite frankly, as to where it would make sense to put it, and also just review it to see if there's any problematic things with it. My understanding, too, is that I think it goes to the Attorney General, ultimately.
You know what? We have town council. My guidance would be to get on his calendar, talk with him about it, see what he says. I think this is urgent, but I would rather see us do it right, and maybe we wait till May, and you check off the Board of Health and town council and other stakeholders that were mentioned, so that when it comes before town meeting, we can just look at it and say, yeah, let's go do this, because it's a fantastic idea. And I think that also there's something like half the towns, well, maybe not half, most of the towns in Massachusetts already have this ban on plastic bags. It takes a while to get into the habit of bringing a bag, but if you go shopping in Boston, they might not now with COVID, but if you go shopping in Boston, they're not going to give you a bag, or they're going to charge you for it.
Right.
So I think it's a great idea.
Thank you, and I appreciate the idea about talking to town council as well. That's absolutely the next step. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions or comments from IGR? Hearing none. Do we have any other questions? Oh, sorry. Please identify yourself for the record and your committee.
Yeah, hi, I'm Frank Lyons, Precinct 8. And I support what you're doing. I think it's a good idea. And if anything, my question and my hesitation is that I don't really think this is a town issue, that it's really a state issue. So is there some way that we could amend this to recommend to our state legislators that, you know, this is what we would like you to do at a state level? Because like you said, things are dragging. And when I saw you were doing this effort, I took a look to see what was going on in the state. I think there's like 160 towns that have it, but there's 300 or 400 towns that don't. And when Massburg, who's active in a lot of this kind of stuff, is
Very familiar with Massburg.
yeah, but they have like a petition to state legislatures.
Yep.
So is there some way we could tie that into this particular thing too, to make a recommendation to our state representatives to tie it into this so it's not going to stop in Stoughton?
You know, well, I certainly don't want it to stop in Stoughton. I certainly would be happy to include Ted Phillips and I guess Mr. Galvin or whoever the other reps are into the loop. But I don't think that's going to necessarily make it pass on a statewide basis in the coming year.
Right.
Certainly, would like for them to know that here's how we stand, and if the town adopts it, hopefully we will certainly pass that along. So that the best thing, of course, is to have a state, and would have been nice if the state had done it 10 years ago. But I don't think we would stop on our tracks and just look to the state. But I think we should obviously include them.
Well, yeah, I almost think amend it to strengthen the recommendation that and you have a much better legal mind than me. That how do you kind of nudge the state level? Because I almost view this as in the past we had the bottle bill.
Yep.
With the nickels.
Yep.
All right. And Simpson Springs might have had a nickel, or somebody else might have had a nickel, but until it went statewide, it really wasn't effective.
Right. No, I think that's obviously that. Quite frankly, it's nationwide would be good.
Yeah.
Nationwide, again, many entire countries in all sorts of, Africa, Europe, India is going to be doing it next, are taking that step. So I think we should involve our legislators, but I think that that's sort of independent or in addition to actually taking a stand as a town. Like if we actually take a stand as a town and vote it and start to implement it. Obviously, I think that sends a message to our state leaders and our governor that this is where we should be going as a state.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only, I don't know if there's any way that we could amend this particular article or something to kind of strengthen that.
You mean to actually say we
yeah,
also recommend that the entire state, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. They kind
Sounds
of
like a very friendly amendment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just kind of give it a little kick.
Okay.
My concern is that I completely agree with you, but
Yep.
I don't think it's really going to be effective until it gets to a lot wider level.
Right. Well, it needs to be as effective as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions or comments from IGR? Please identify yourself and your committee.
Yes. Liz Giordano, Precinct 2, Intergovernmental Relations. Better? Okay. Liz Giordano, Precinct 2, Intergovernmental Relations. I just wanted to come up as somebody, I know Heidi kind of pushed me on this one, somebody who is younger, who has never known a time without plastic bags. Put it out there. I feel like it's definitely a generational shift. Nobody in my mom's groups or at football fields or baseball ever uses them or expects to have them. So I do think it's a big generational shift. I also know a lot of the surrounding towns, when you go into them, whether you're in the city, you're in Canton, you're in Sharon, they don't even have the option. And it's not a crisis. You just don't use them. You bring a bag with you. You reuse something that you have, like your New Yorker bag. So I just feel like we're kind of making this whole huge mountain out of a molehill. It's not going to cost businesses more because have you been into Marshall's? Like they sell the bags. Like for $1, you can have one of their bags and you reuse it, and it's not an issue. So I just feel like this is one of those things. I'm glad that you brought it forward. I think probably where Sandra went, you can agree. Like it's not a huge issue. And it's not something that we need to take all this time really to deliberate on. I think something like this is great to bring to town meeting. I think as more and more people talk about it, it becomes more real. And you realize, it is a crisis that's happening to, climate. And if we can do this tiny little thing, it makes a lot of sense. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions, comments from IGR? None being heard. Do we have any questions or comments from Muni Ops? Any questions or comments from municipal regulations? Please identify yourself and your committee for the record.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Campbell. I'm the chair of the Municipal Regulations Committee. I'm going to let other committee members speak first.
Sandy Barber, Municipal Regs, Precinct 6. I'd kind of like to give a different perspective here and piggyback on maybe something that Mr. Laurie said. I'm a volunteer Meals on Wheels driver and until very recently worked in food pantry. We are very dependent, unfortunately, on plastic bags. In the case of the food pantry, and again, I left a couple of months ago, but since we stopped allowing people into the food pantry, we pack boxes and plastic bags for them. Many of those plastic bags are recycled. We bring them in. Some of our patrons bring them in. Sometimes we buy them from the Greater Boston Food Bank. In the case of Meals on Wheels, normally we hand our clients a packaged food package and then a separate paper bag with milk, bread, condiments. In the cases of inclement weather, when it's pouring rain or snowing, or in the summertime when it's 95 degrees, the condensation, the stuff just, the paper bags just shred, and then we are repackaging them into plastic bags for our clients. In the case of Meals on Wheels, 100% of those bags that we use are donated. We all bring in our used bags. Our seniors bring them in and drop them off. So they're all recycled. I'm not necessarily speaking against this article. I absolutely understand and agree with the problem. But someone mentioned unintended consequences. Our supply would dry up. And no, this isn't it maybe is a minor problem. But I sat here during these presentations trying to think of our workaround. In our case, reusable bags is not a workaround. In many cases with our seniors, we're actually helping them by handing them a plastic bag that they can easily grasp. So I'm not necessarily speaking against this. I'm giving a different perspective. There are unintended consequences, as there is with virtually everything we do at town meeting. So just a different perspective for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions or comments from municipal regulations? Everyone, thank you very much.
Thank you. Dave Billow, Precinct 4, member of Municipal Regulations. I'm also a member of the town's Energy and Sustainability Committee. And I wasn't going to start out with this, but ironically, my wife's a volunteer with Meals on Wheels as well. And I know she's had to put out the call in the past for donations of plastic grocery bags. So I definitely recognize the use and the validity of that. So didn't know that Sandy was going to start out with that as well. I guess I'll add in just as a segue to what I was intending to say is that I think that the problem with single-use plastic bags is we just get dozens and dozens of them, during the week or during the month, and whether we want them or not, really. And then we use them for a few minutes, and then we bring them home, and then they probably just get thrown out. Is what's going to happen. If uses like the home
trash bag liner or if Meals on Wheels or other people need them, they're used and obtained for that purpose, and so when they're produced and when they're purchased, they have a use and they are used. Whereas the grocery bags are just used for a few minutes and then that's it, and then they go into trash or litter or whatever. So I think that those bags are cheap, and if Meals on Wheels needs 1,000 for $10, that probably can be done. I'd be willing to supply those. My wife would too. But I know that's kind of that's an issue that needs to be dealt with. The real reason I wanted to stand up was that the petitioner, Molly, did come before the Energy and Sustainability Committee about 2 years ago, back when we were meeting live. So it was a while ago, and talked to us in concept about this article, and the committee supported it then. We've kept in touch since, and the committee does still support it. So just as a representative of the committee, I wanted to mention that as well.
Thank you.
Mike Harmon, Precinct 8, Municipal Regulations. Molly, I want to know if you researched, did you find how the other towns adapted to this and what the problems they had?
I haven't done that level of research to see, whether they
Yeah, how
have
they
issues
implemented
or,
it, what problems they
particular,
ran into. Do you know?
I certainly can reach out to them. Yes, I think I can reach out to them. So I'll add them to my list of people I should reach out to and see how it played out in their town, or whatever issues they had. I mean, it is something that's been spreading and not diminishing, obviously. So I think it's something, again, that there may be some bumps in the road, and there may be some more challenges for certainly some people with some uses. But that's another good idea to reach out and speak with them.
So these places have been doing it for a long time. Maybe we can learn from their mistakes and not maybe steal some of their ideas that worked really well.
I'm all
too.
for doing that. Yeah.
Thank you, Molly.
Thanks.
Hi, Carolyn Campbell, Precinct 5, Municipal Regulations Committee. When I first heard about this proposed bylaw, I was a bit skeptical because while I tend to use my bags that I get mostly to pick up dog poop from Cookie, or I've also used them in my
I'm not allowed
small-
to talk about dog poop, so I would have brought up the same thing.
I
ready
think
for that.
both you and I have probably spoken more than enough on dog poop for any town meeting ever. So, and then I think I also have used them in my small bathroom, and I may use them to help clean out the litter box. But then when I really think about it, I look at other towns. I look at the plastic bags. I go to, if I go to Stop and Shop, I get plastic bags. They need to give me 3 for my Diet Coke because the first 2 bottles are breaking before I get out of the store. So there's an awful lot of waste in these plastic bags. And, I can find other options to go pick up Cookies dog poop.
I can talk with you about that.
All right? There are biodegradable bags that I can get, and that's probably better. So, I mean, I don't think for most of us it's after the original shock of, oops, I need to have a bag. It's going to be that much of an inconvenience. I also don't think it's really going to be that much of an inconvenience. It's not going to be as much of a burden on smaller businesses that people are afraid of, mostly because if you go into a smaller business, no one's going to go call, all right, probably most of us aren't going to go call Town Hall or the Board of Health if the little store in the square gave us a plastic bag. I imagine if this bylaw passes and Stop and Shop is still handing out plastic bags, someone's going to go call the town manager and tell them to do something about it. Stop and Shop, however, is in a fine position. They're already doing it in other stores. All right? Shaw's in Canton, where a lot of us may go to shop, depending upon where you live, they don't have plastic bags. You go to Price Right, they sell you those thick plastic bags. All right? So they're not going to be burdened by it. You go to Roach Brothers on the other end of the town, and they don't have plastic bags. You talk about Target in Stoughton, they give you plastic bags. You go to the Target in Easton, I was over there the other day, they don't have plastic bags because Easton has this bylaw. They give you some sort of fabric thing whatever, to put stuff in. So, I mean, the bigger stores, which produce the most of the plastic bags, those companies already have solutions. So what we're basically doing is telling those big companies that we want to be treated, we want you to treat us like you're treating Canton and Sharon and Easton, and stop just giving us these plastic bags that don't work. It's, and with the overall better off, with the overall, with the odds.
Get some oxygen there, Carolyn.
I know it's
hard.
With the benefit to with the trade-off being that this benefits the environment as well. I mean, I think how strictly you want people from Town Hall to go enforce it on the small businesses is entirely up to us. If you put the public pressure on Town Hall to do so, Town Hall will do so. If you put the public pressure on them not to do so much for the little small businesses, then they won't do so. So we can control that, but starting by having a bylaw like this on the books, especially directing it to the bigger stores or the state and national corporations in the area that probably produce most of the plastic bags in the town, it's a good place to start. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions or comments from the public? I think up in the back there.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Please identify yourself.
Absolutely. Mark Zamanian, 5 Low Avenue, Stoughton, obviously. Molly, you have me about 90% of the way. I do have some concerns that this bylaw does not address some things, and a couple of speakers have spoken about unintended consequences. One of my greater concerns about this is how this affects those folks who simply can't afford to make a donation to get a paper bag, or simply can't afford to pay $1 or $10, which has been the marker that I've been seeing as of late, for a reusable bag. So this bylaw doesn't account for those situations. So if there was wording in here that could provide sort of an interim plan that you could get the businesses like Stop and Shop and Roach Brothers and Shaw's and such to take that step. And somebody had mentioned Price Right. I think they're an excellent example. Those are very durable, reusable bags that cost a dime. For somebody who's struggling, a dime's not so much. $1 or $10 could, make a difference for them when it comes to what they're buying that week and what they're able to provide their families. And I had thought of the food pantries. I worked for many years at St. Anthony's Free Market, and we use primarily plastic bags to assist those people. So if this bylaw was to take that into account, it would be a whole lot easier, in my opinion, to get this passed, because we'd be considerate of that. I'm not concerned about the big businesses. They'll make adjustments, and they have in other towns. But as I believe Frank said earlier, this isn't going to work very well if we're on an island with it. We need to, and I understand where you're going with this, and I actually appreciate it. But I do have some concerns about some of the things that just simply weren't thought of when this was written.
I have thought of a couple of those things. So with respect to cost, in a 10-cent plastic bag, you get a Price Right. That's not covered by the regulation. You can still get your reusable, thick, may last for years, plastic bag at Price Right or a similar place. And as you've said, that only costs 10 cents. So I don't think it's a significant financial impact. And I really also thought, honestly, it's great to have cloth bags. Some of us have too many cloth bags because, again, everywhere you go, they give you one. It would be great if we want to have, a big donation and people could gather many, many cloth bags. People want to come by and get a free cloth bag to use for their groceries or to use for whatever needs they use. I think that's something that we could organize and we could do at Town Hall. Run it through the washer and dryer, make sure it's clean, and donate some of these really heavy-duty tote bags so that we can share them with people who may not have been collecting them and who may need them. But I do think many people probably have excessive ones in their house that we could share. And then, and again, I think for people who are particularly impacted, like the volunteer organizations, that's something we should definitely look at and, brainstorm what the solution could be, whether it's, the heavy-duty plastic bag, whether it's something else that gets reused, whether it's, we all have things, perhaps too many things delivered to our house in cardboard that could be used to deliver things. But, to brainstorm and to find some solutions to help those programs, I think would be very important.
And again, I appreciate your efforts on this, Molly, so please don't take this the wrong way. But I do want to put some things for us into perspective when you're considering moving this bylaw forward. A cloth bag that has been mentioned often tonight requires 7,100 uses before it equals the environmental impact of a single-use plastic bag. A paper bag requires 71 uses, which is virtually impossible. I've tried, believe me. The Whole Foods store, it's a supermarket now owned by Amazon, pays me a nickel for every time I reuse a paper bag, so that's why I know that. You can get about 25 uses out of a paper bag before it starts to fall apart. And there's no question we have a single-use plastic bag problem. But I do believe that writing a law to regulate people isn't the answer. I think education is the answer. And I thank you for your time, and I appreciate your willingness to listen to me.
And thanks for your comments, Mark. And I 100% agree that I shouldn't say right. Education is really important on these issues. And I think I brought that up when I was on school committee, but not sure how much traction it got. I think it's a matter of the state curriculum needs to include these issues.
Do we have any other questions or comments from the public?
The public?
Mr. Chairman, if I might, though, before we go further, just so people understand, this was a petitioned article, so the signatures were gathered. The article cannot be changed from the way it's presented. It's a petitioned article. It has to go through that way. So, I mean, if you're looking to make changes and so forth, it can't be done on this article at this time. I just want people to understand that. We've gone through this before with petitioned articles, and that's right from town council. You can't change it once the signatures are gathered. It goes in the way it was presented. Just a point of information, that's all.
You're welcome. Please identify yourself for the record.
Yep, Lisa Lyons, Precinct 2. And I would just like to reiterate what I've heard from you, sir, about when I was young trying to save trees. And you as well, Diane. I'm sorry, I don't remember your name. I agree with you, the bacteria in the bags. The other people who have brought up single uses I just feel that it is inappropriate in most instances to impose other people's opinions on the public. There's free choice in this country, and the market should decide. And to have activists, there's way too many regulations. We need smaller government, not bigger government, in my humble opinion. And that's all I'd like to say. And thank you for everyone else who thinks that way.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions or
Any other
comments
public comment?
from the public?
Please step forward, state your name and address.
Thank you.
Please identify yourself for the record.
Hi, I'm Sandra Grovey, Precinct 7. I'm so sorry, this mask. I just got a copy of the article. He just handed it to me. So first, I want to give you credit for doing this petition, because it takes a lot of guts to go around and put something like this together. So kudos to you, and kudos to anybody that, has the guts to do this. Like I said, I was just trying to speed read it while you were speaking. So you just mentioned that it can't be changed, understood. But this has to go on the ballot for a vote. So the townspeople, would they be able to vote on it if it ultimately went forward? Or is it
My understanding is that the town meeting could adopt it.
So town meeting would vote. I'm just trying to figure out. So town meeting would vote on it, and that would be it.
I think something, I believe it has to go to the Attorney General to approve.
So that's, okay, I think they're shaking their head yet, because it would probably be good if the folks in the town had an opportunity to have a little more input into this. And then also, I know that you had mentioned that it was a 6-month window. Would it be possible if, if this weren't to go forward and you had to give it a little more time, to consider instead of 6 months, a year in the article, so that way folks have a bit more time to get adjusted, to understand what that, what's going to come with that. Maybe that educational piece could come with it if it were to pass later on.
Well, I think John just answered that question. It is, 6 months is the way it was drafted. If people, obviously, if that's an obstacle for people, then that would, perhaps delay it, and we would have to we'd have to revise it, and then 100, how many 100 people would have to come forward and re-sign that?
Yeah.
Drive over to my house and re-sign it. But I do think this, I understand education is an issue, but I also think this is just something that's been 144 towns in our state have already done this, and the issue has been out there. Certainly people have been talking about plastic water bottles and things of that nature as well. So I think it's not going to be, it's going to be adjustment for some people, and some people aren't going to be happy about it. But unfortunately, we didn't really create this problem. Industry created this problem because it was cheap and easy, and then it accelerated and it became more and more whatever. And they've certainly known for 20 years of the destruction. And we, the consumers, eventually have to stand up and push back and say the destruction outweighs the benefits.
Well, good luck. Thank you.
Thank you,
for answering my
Sandra.
question.
Yes, it's a bylaw, so it would be voted at town meeting, go to the Attorney General, and if passed there, if it's okay with them, then it would become a bylaw in Stoughton. It wouldn't go back to the voters. That would be.
Yeah, I have a correction too. I think it was said 100 signatures. If it was brought
However
back,
many signatures I got, I can't remember, 200?
you needed 100 for this one, but if it was pushed to an annual, you would only need 10 signatures. It's only 10. You don't need another 100 to come back.
Oh, that's much easier.
It's
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And is it okay to, that's why I was asking. I was only asking because there was so much conversation, which is great conversation about it. And I didn't know I don't know what anybody's thinking or how folks will support it. I give you kudos. But if it weren't to, maybe there's some considerations to having it if it was the 10 signature and it was the annual town meeting. That was.
Do we have any other questions or
More
comments?
public comment?
Barbara, please identify yourself for the record.
Barbara Ansvino, Precinct 4. Just to give you options, because what she was saying is what I wanted to ask too, Bob. If she withdraws this article, does she have to repetition it, or can it just go forward?
My understanding would be if you withdraw or ask for it to be dismissed, you can bring it back, but you would have to start the process again at the annual town meeting, which would be only 10 signatures.
And my second question, because I know with zoning, if it fails, you have to wait 3 years before you can bring it back. If she brings it back, right, but if she brings this up and it fails, can she re-petition for the spring, or does she have to wait?
The question really is, if you change it enough that it's sort of like a new bylaw, a new proposal, the way people bring things back, they have to do some changes, so it won't be just like the old one if it failed. If you make some changes, it will have to be looked at probably by me and by myself and maybe the town council, make sure it's changed enough that you can bring a new type of bylaw doing the same type of action that you want to bring forward.
Sounds like a good question for town council.
Yeah, it's a town. I leave it
Okay.
up to town council.
So basically, if it fails, she's not going to be really penalized. She just has to bring it.
You have to change it a little
Okay.
bit. Enough for town council to agree with the change. Can't be the exact same bylaw.
Yep, all right, that makes sense.
That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
Do we have any other questions or comments from the public?
Come on down.
Heidi? You
I
on
have a
IGR?
one. Heidi Tucker, Municipal Operations.
Thank
I
you.
missed the window. I am also Precinct 8 rep. It's been interesting to listen to everybody talk tonight. All valid issues and concerns. I am for this article. I actually had a social distance visit so I could sign the petition. I also worked at St. Anthony Market last week when their power went out and helped move all the turkeys, and then I also ended up helping to pack everything for people to pick up their stuff on Friday. I did not see any plastic bags in use. When I was packing, I did not pack any food or any items into a plastic bag at all. They reuse boxes, which they are getting away from ordering new boxes by reusing the boxes that they already have food delivered in coming into the building. And so it's coming into the building as a case and leaving the building as a food package for people in our community. I was very impressed. And so those of you who are saying you work in the pantry and there's plastic bags, it's possible. I've seen it done. It's cold and windy, and it's possible. Small changes that we make in our lifestyles make a huge difference. I've been using reusable bags for years. I walk out of department stores without bags. In the course of the last 5 years, when I tell a grocer that I do not need a bag or I do not want a bag, or you can please just put the stuff back in my cart the way it was 3 feet before, I can just take that out to my car, put it in my car, and bring it in my house. I do that when I go to Costco. These are all very doable things. You need to make a small adjustment. I also had a total hip replacement 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago. I'm probably going to have knee surgery in the next couple of years. Those little, at times, extra up and down the stairs, it's actually good for me. So all these small changes that we can make, this being one of them, will make a huge difference for our environment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments from the
Any other
public?
public comment?
IGR, Community Ops, Community Regs, Finance Committee, public? Seeing none, we will move on to the next article. Thank you very much, Molly.
I just say thank you to everyone for your comments, and also thank you to everybody who questioned this and for just the tone of civility and respect, and I'm really proud of our town in that regard. Thank you to everybody on FENCOM.
Thank you very much, and we're going to take this out of order. We're going to Article 10, the Affordable Housing Trust.
You had the magic. It works. You want it now. You need it now. And maybe it's because you needed it. That's why it started working. That's crazy. Oh, my God.
You have 3 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, before Mr. Zemania makes his presentation, could I ask a question?
Sure.
Is it the purpose of this particular meeting to debate the articles, or is it the purpose to just ask questions on the articles?
We can discuss, and I guess if
I'm
it
sorry,
turns
what?
to we can discuss and ask questions, and if it turns to a bit of debate, then that's one thing. But
So-
later on, we would be discussing before voting, too.
So we are opening it up to debate on the articles, is that correct?
Within some time frame, yeah. We're not going to spend all night.
All right.
But we can debate it a bit, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Set to go? Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Finance Committee, Municipal Regulations, Municipal Operations, and Intergovernmental for being here tonight. My name is Mark Zemania, and I'm the chair of the Housing Trust Subcommittee, which was set up by the Community Preservation Committee. Actually, in the beginning, it was set up to provide COVID relief to the town during the pandemic. That was back in March of 2020. With me tonight is Barry Castler, the Program Administrator for the Housing Trust Subcommittee and the Community Preservation Committee. So you have before you tonight Article 10, which is to establish an affordable housing trust in accordance with General Laws, Chapter 44B. Before, you've all read this, I presume. Everybody's had this for some time. I want to give you a little bit of history. Back when the pandemic started in March of 2020, the Community Preservation Committee got together and said we spend very little money on community housing. As a matter of fact, we'd spend nearly $0 to date at that time on community housing of any sort, and that is one of the three categories that the CPC can spend money on. We all made a decision that this town was in real need of some assistance. Its residents were in need of assistance, and the CPC agreed to set up a trust. It was actually at the time a COVID-19 relief subcommittee, and we were to attack that problem. We met with the select board, and the select board appointed a member, and as a result of that, we ended up with a 5-member board that in 12 days crafted the necessary language to bring an article to town meeting. I am very grateful that town meeting saw fit to approve at that time $510,000 in relief. We came back to town meeting at the special town meeting in November, and they approved another $250,000 in assistance to our residents. We did the second half of that because Barry, myself, and the committee had looked at the numbers and projected out some and decided that if the numbers continued at the rate they were at the time, we would have run out of money before our annual town meeting. So town meeting was very generous, approved an additional $250,000. That brought us to $760,000 in assistance to Stoughton residents. $10,000 of that money was set aside for administrative costs, and we haven't spent a dime of that yet. The Stoughton Housing Authority has been administering this program for us and doing so brilliantly, and as a result of that, it turns out this program is, to date and to my knowledge, the least expensive running COVID relief assistance program the state has had. Don't know about federally, but the average cost of this, just so you're aware, is somewhere between 15 and 18% of the gross dollars we set aside. So if you think about that for a minute, we saved quite a bit of money for this town, perhaps as much as $200,000 if the program was right. So at any rate, in the process of going through the relief fund, it occurred to us that we had a bit of a housing issue in town. And when I say that, I don't mean the cost of our homes wasn't sufficient. As we all know, the cost of real estate has skyrocketed in recent memory. And those of us who own homes are very pleased with that. However, I think that puts folks who want to own a home in a very difficult situation. Putting that dream of home ownership, which is the primary American dream, further and further out of sight. So we got together and again asked the CPC and the Select Board, and they both agreed that our committee would be the right committee to do the labor on this. And we created legislation for this. We've created a bylaw. We also created a declaration of trust. Now, it's interesting to note that the declaration of trust was not needed at this point. It will be needed once this passes town meeting. However, we wanted to ensure that everybody understood that the declaration and the bylaw themselves mimic identically. That's important because a lot can get lost between when a law is written and when it's applied. So the declaration is the application of the law. And we really wanted to ensure that our wishes to provide for our residents and do so in the manner that we felt was most suitable for Stoughton. Die? No, I'm still good. It's when we're sitting here, it's weird. We created a special act that was done with town council, and I do want to note that town council has worked hand in hand with the subcommittee. We were given full access to town council by the select board and the town manager. We're very much appreciative of that. And the overall cost of this ended up being very small. Although the bills haven't finished coming in, we're currently under $2,000 for town council's efforts, which, in my opinion, is a small amount of money for what this town will end up getting. We also created a policy and procedures sort of foundation for a board of trust if it's set up, if town meeting approves this. We created the mission statement. I think I said that. And we did two other things. We looked at how other towns handled this and what were some of the pitfalls that they encountered as they put together an affordable housing trust and furthermore instituted an affordable housing trust. So we came up with a frequently asked questions sheet. Now, here we all, maybe 6 weeks ago, thinking, we got all this information, but people have no way to access it. So myself and Barry worked with Google, whatever here, and we created a website. And that website now sits prominently on the stoughton.org main page in the top right corner under community housing. That link that brings you to the website provides every stitch of information that we've put together for this. So we really feel that we created a situation that was highly transparent, highly readable for the residents and for the public officials. With that said, let's talk a little bit about what can a housing trust provide for the town. Well, a housing trust can provide quick response to real estate opportunities. This is typically problematic for the CPC because there's a process involved with the CPC, and that process means you have to get an appraisal, often a 21E, which is an environmental study of the property, and that sort of takes 3, 4, 5, 6 months, depending on the timing. And then we have to go and actually ask town to purchase that property, and that's an additional anywhere between 3 and 8 months, depending on whether or not we have a special town meeting and how prepared the town is. So a housing trust will have funding in it that will be provided from a number of different sources, and I'll get into that in a little bit, but they'll be able to respond immediately to real estate opportunities. One of the other things that a trust can do is provide housing for folks who want to stay in Stoughton but simply can't afford to. Those could be first-time home buyers, children of parents who were raised in Stoughton, and I think we've all heard the story, well, my kids live in North Carolina, or my kids live in Florida. Why? Because they can't afford to live here. Real estate prices in Massachusetts are some of the highest in the country. And, you know, in a sense, I kind of look at this and say, what kind of great minds are we sending to other states that have come through our public school system, been educated here, and then we send them to other states to do that great work? And what could we possibly be missing if we don't keep them here? We can also assist the town in monitoring over the affordable housing stock. Believe it or not, we do have a series, thanks to the planning board's work with the downtown center and getting an affordability component, which is 10% of any large development that's done in the downtown. That's created a situation where we have a number of deed-restricted properties in hand already. Those have to be monitored, registered with DHCD, which is the Department of Housing and Community Development. It's a state agency that handles that. There's some work and effort involved in that. Nobody had done it until very recently. The town planner has stepped in and is now taking care of that with the oversight of his boss, Mark Tisdale, and the town manager. So I'm really pleased to see that somebody's now monitoring that and getting that done, but it's a lot of work. And he has to be the planner and handle this. So this is something that the trust could also do. One of the biggest problems I have with municipal government is our inability to take funding from private organizations. Yes, it can be done, but it's very convoluted, it's very complicated, and takes a long time. So most private institutions don't really have an appetite for it. And one of the main reasons, as you folks all know, is that money will have to go into the general fund. So it's very difficult to allocate it toward specific projects. It can be done, but it's complicated and not simple. We, as a housing trust, they can foster relationships with banks, private corporations, people who regularly give money away, but don't give it to us because we don't have an outlet for that. And the last leg of this is we can accept state and federal grants. There's an awful lot of money out there right now. I know that that Governor Baker in 2020 had a surplus of roughly $4.5 billion. That money through various grant programs is now going to be distributed to towns. And I would like to be first in line for that money, not last. And I don't know anybody who would argue about free money. So this gives us an opportunity to have an organization that applies for that money directly. So what can a housing trust do? So we know what it's about. We understand that aspect of it. But a trust can allow Stoughton to allocate funds for the housing we need. There's no question we're going to come back to the Community Preservation Committee and ask for, at very least, starter funds. And frankly, my vision would be to see an annual donation from the Community Preservation Funds directly to a housing trust. That's important for a number of reasons. It's a whole lot easier for me to go to a bank and say, I need you to match X, than it is to say, I need your money. When I have some skin in the game, if you will, and I'm not a big fan of that saying, but there's some validity to it. When I have money on the table, it's a lot easier to get grant money. It's a lot easier to get private corporations to say, I'll tell you what, I'll chip in 20% of that or 10% of that. And all of a sudden, I have all the money I need. And there was a project recently, I don't remember the town, but they have an affordable housing trust, and they invested $200,000 into a project. They received $20 million from the state. That's a really small investment on the town's part and a really large return. I know there's nobody here that if I was to tell you put $200,000 in the stock market, you could pull $20 million out tomorrow, everybody would find a way to come up with $200,000. We could provide financial support for the construction of moderately priced homes. Those will require deed restrictions. There's a value for that, though. There are folks who have no problem with buying the house at a lower price and selling it at a lower price in the future to another needy family. We can preserve expiring affordability deed restrictions. This is an important factor, and most of the town doesn't know this, but we have a project here, and I hate the word project, but we have a development in Stoughton under the name of Presidential Estates. And Presidential Estates was due to expire in 2019. They have about 105 units, affordable units. If we lost Presidential Estates, and we were very fortunate, the owners of that development sought and found another outlet through housing and urban development on the federal level. But if they didn't do that and they decided to switch to market rate, we would have fallen below our 10%. Now that opens us up to a whole bunch of other problems with developers. They can now jump over the town's zoning and planning processes and go straight to the state and build something we don't want. So we lose a lot of control when that happens, when we fall below that 10%. So it's very important that we maintain that number and try and increase it a little bit. Currently, we're roughly at 11.5%. 1.5% is not a lot. And it could happen with any one of these big projects. We can create programs to assist qualifying first-time home buyers. Understand that means a deed-restricted property again. And every time we put a deed-restricted property on our rolls, it doesn't come off. It's perpetual. And that's also an important factor, especially as growth in this town continues. According to last night's data, I think we're at about 26,000 in 2010 population. The census says we're at just over 29,000 now. So there's no question population will continue to grow, especially where you see people coming out of the city now and seeking areas on the suburbs to live because there's a little more flexibility in their jobs. And we can develop buildable town-owned property. This, to me, was another huge factor because we have a ton of property that is buildable, and we don't get any revenue from that. If we develop it and build it, we take it from the town as a gift or whatever needs to be worked out to make that happen. Hopefully it would be a gift, but if we put a home on it, that generates revenue for the town. And in my opinion, that's an important factor because we're always screaming about a lack of revenue. The composition of the trust briefly has one non-voting member, and that is the town manager or the town manager's designee. And then the select board, planning board, housing authority, redevelopment authority, community preservation committee, and the committee on finance and taxation would all have members of this. And then there'd be 3 at-large resident appointees. One of the reasons we wanted to include somebody from finance and taxation is because we always felt it was very important that the body that oversees the finances of this town, which is you, does have a say in this. And it's all a part of that. Let's be more transparent with what we're doing here in town. As I said earlier, there's a community website. It's very easy to get to a community housing website. As I said, it's up at the top right-hand corner of the homepage for Stoughton. What's that? No. Well, yes, it is on there. If you go to the Stoughton.org, you'll find it. Yeah, it'll be community housing. It's, well, on the computer at least. Yeah, you found it. All right, we're okay. Oh, well, that could be a mobile thing, and I can have that looked at. But we really did work very hard to keep this as transparent as possible. One other note to make, we did have a public forum on this on October 4th. We had some guest speakers from Mass Housing Partnership, our own housing authority, and Dottie Fulgenetti, a longtime resident of Stoughton, no longer is, but she was one of the founders of the Affordable Housing Trust in Easton. And we actually went to her and picked her brain quite a bit because I wanted to know, where did you go wrong? Where did you make mistakes? I wanted to learn from that. I think that's an important factor. So we worked very hard on this, and we really do hope that you will support us. And at this point, I'm happy to take any questions or answers, and give you answers for any questions you might have. Thank you.
Any questions from the Finance Committee? Joel Wolk.
Thank you. Excellent presentation, Mark. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joel.
I actually have some technical questions.
Okay, I'll do my best.
That's okay. The trustees, I want to make sure I understand this correctly. The trustees are actually an independent group. Is it similar to, say, like the library trustees? Is there any type of, if you're unhappy with something the trustees do you have any place to go to appeal that decision?
That's an excellent question, Joel. One I haven't encountered yet, and I've encountered quite a few.
Well, I was when I lived in Sharon, I was on the Standing Building Committee. We reported directly to town meeting, and we constantly had people saying, well, I'm going to go to the select board and tell them that you did it wrong. And the select board said, we don't have any control over them, so I'm sorry. So I guess that's why I'm asking the question.
So it is an excellent question, although I don't have a complete answer for you. One of the things that we did, aside from setting up members from each of the boards and committees, and that was done for much that purpose that you're talking about, but we mandated that a vote could not be taken without a majority of the members being present. What I mean by that is if you wanted to pass something, you needed 5 votes to pass it.
Oh, no,
if you had 5 people there, you could not pass something with 3 votes.
I'm not disputing that at all.
Right,
okay?
and that's kind of an important factor in ensuring that at least the overwhelming
Well,
majority.
The whole Board of Trustees is at a meeting and they vote on something and somebody, myself, says, that's a bad vote, it's a bad way of doing things, I don't like it. Do I have any recourse?
I can't say that I've thought of that. Barry, do you want to?
Representative member is selected by the representative committee.
Right.
And technically, the select board appoints them, ultimately.
I'm sorry, what?
Technically, the select board is the appointing body.
That's what I
for the
thought.
trustees.
Okay, all right. The second question I have is really from my perspective as a member of the Finance Committee. Is this going to be a separate cost center in the town budget, or will it be part of the CDC, a line item, or how is this going to be reviewed by this committee?
Yeah, great question. The funding primarily in the beginning will be CPC funded.
Okay.
So it will still come back to this committee for approval of the Community Preservation Committee's recommendation. We will not be looking for any money from the town, although if the town wants to offer us some, we take it. What I will say is the only investment the town would have in this would be if they chose to hand over land. And I can't get into the details of that because I have no idea how that would even function. There may be back taxes on property that the town would want covered, things like that. Ultimately, those kinds of decisions end up back here before you folks, so you have a good deal of say on that.
No, I understand,
Yeah.
and I read in your the write-up of the article that the treasurer-collector basically is the custodian of the funds, which I believe is correct. Is the town accountant who has complained many times that he hasn't got enough to do, is he going to be involved in reviewing these or doing the accounting on these?
To what extent? You mean in terms of the expenses, the expenditures?
Yes.
No, the trustees would have their own.
The trustees would do it themselves?
Yes. And they have to hire an auditor every year and have all of their books audited every year. That's required.
All right, so they would hire an accounting firm to do that?
That's correct.
And that expense would be part of?
The trust's burden.
Okay, all right.
Not the town's.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Eddie?
Thanks, Mark. The funds go into the pot. Who owns the end properties when you get done? Does the trust own them? Does the individual own them? And who's going to track 400 deeds when you do all this stuff over 10 years for restricted deeds and all this other stuff?
So the trust has the ability to assist the town planner in monitoring the deeds. Ultimately, the state, which is the Department of Housing and Community Development, monitors that. What was the first question? I apologize.
Who owns the properties? If you give $100,000 to somebody, who owns the property?
So if it's a home that is built with a deed restriction, when the home is sold, the owner owns the home. However, if the owner chooses to sell it, that owner must sell it to somebody else who qualifies for a deed-restricted home.
Okay.
Now,
And
if it was, let's just say, and you know, this is interesting you bring this up because this is something we grappled with as a subcommittee. What happens if we have buildings? Say we have an apartment building.
Well, that's
we
my
put
next
one up
question.
for,
Why do you have an apartment building?
yeah, for senior housing, okay? And which is, so we can't write this to negate anybody, but we have priorities as a trust, and the trust will choose those priorities. We've clearly heard from the town that senior housing is not only necessary, but needed immediately. So although I can't and don't control the trust, I envision that being something that the trust will focus on first and foremost. However, if we owned a building and the trust dissolves, which we have language for that to happen, then the special act takes the property and puts it in the hands of the housing authority, which are very well set up to handle this because that's what they do. The state law is written in such a way that the select board end up with it. Well, we all know that would be a loser, and that isn't meant as any offense to the select board, but town government's not designed to manage apartment buildings. The housing authority is. And, you know, this has come before the select board. They were very much in favor of this. It does require that special act. If that special act fails in state legislation, then it would go back to the select board, and then they would have to turn it over. I think we have an article of the select board turning land over to the conservation on this warrant.
Let me ask a question this way.
Yeah.
Can the housing trust fund itself, build its own stuff, own its own stuff, and if they want to deed a 20-unit apartment building to the housing authority for free or gift, can they do that?
Can they gift to the housing authority? Absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
They can build it. As a matter of fact, it's interesting. That was another thing we spoke about. The housing trust is not designed to be managers of projects or developers. They're designed to be the financial outlet to assist nonprofit contractors, state-funded projects, things like that, things that wouldn't come to Stoughton if we didn't have a trust. So they want a hands-off, and we designed it for it to be more or less a hands-off system. It would be suicide to have us become developers, you know?
Do you have any other questions, Eddie?
Seth, thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
Do you have any other? Diane?
Thank you for the presentation. And until Ed spoke, I thought I understood this, but now I'm going to ask this question. So one of the articles here talks about to sell, lease, exchange, transfer, or convey any personal, mixed, or real property. So who owns that property?
So during the...
And more importantly, who's liable for that property?
Yeah, during the longevity of the... Are you speaking of property that would be donated to the trust?
Yes.
It could be a private owner. So there's the ability, and this comes from state legislation, there could, you know, let's say an elderly person is close and decides, I want to bequeath my home to the town so that it can be a deed-restricted, affordable home for somebody else. I have no children. I have nobody to leave it to. That's what I'd like to have happen. They can write that directly into the will. The housing trust would accept that property. Mm-hmm. That property would become a part of the housing trust assets until it was dissolved. Once it was dissolved, then it would revert to the housing authority if, in fact, the special legislation passes, and we have every reason to believe it will. But if that failed, it would obviously revert to the select board, and they would have to pass it off to the housing authority.
Okay, so once it's put into the trust...
The trust owns it.
The trust owns it.
Correct.
Is the trust liable for it?
Yes.
Okay, so there would be maybe insurance or other things that would have to be taken out on this property?
The trust would have to take care of those things until it sold the property or rented the property, yes.
Okay, which leads me to my second question about borrowing money. So the trust would be able to turn around and borrow some money on these properties as well?
They could. It's interesting. This was something we looked at. Because the trust would have no regular income, if you think about it, until it developed properties, this is sort of something that in principle we struggled a little with. Mm-hmm. The CPC could become a regular source of income. It's also one of the reasons we want to foster relationships with banks. We want them to be comfortable with this. So if we needed $400,000 in cash value to get a project done, that we have banks lined up that says, you know what, we'll help you with this. We'll get you the money on a short-term loan as a nonprofit, and then furthermore, we'll help you sell it, we'll take our money back, and we'll give you something in return, you know. So that's one of those fostering relationships with banks. It's not just about give me your money.
Right.
It's about help the people get the mortgages, assist us in getting these projects done.
Okay. So who would be responsible for all this borrowing?
The trust would.
The trust. But the trust doesn't have any money, so who would be responsible for paying that money back?
So,
Would it be the
yeah,
town?
it came to you tonight unfunded, but our intent is to ask the Community Preservation Committee
Yeah.
for a $500,000 infusion for Springtown meeting. The reason we didn't do that now is because if we coupled these two things now and this failed, what do you do with the $500,000 that we just set aside? So we wanted to establish this. There's a process. We need to accept state legislation,
Right.
and then we need to accept our own legislation. And it's in a package, but it's important that you all realize that's what essentially we'll be doing, accepting three things in one ball of wax.
Okay. And you expect the CPC to give you this, have they agreed to give you this money yet, or?
So October 25th was the cutoff for applications to the CPC. I can't speak for the committee, but I will say that there has been a very favorable committal to a part of what we do that we haven't been able to do very well.
Okay, and they do have this money to give you?
I
Or
would
would- or would-
anticipate support, but I couldn't
Yeah.
guarantee.
Or would they have to borrow it as well?
No, the CPC is flush with cash.
Okay.
And it would be a cash article, so.
Okay. There you go.
Hey, I want to spend money. Come see me.
Thank you. Thank you for your answers.
Thank you, Diane.
Next is
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mark, great presentation. I do have one quick question to ask you. Hypothetically, you were to build a single-family house, and a family comes along, moves in, gets a mortgage from even a local bank, let's say Rockland Trust right across the street here, and the people default. In other words, they can't make their payments. Eviction and all that ensues. Who does that fall back on, you or the bank? I mean, us or the bank? In other words, what are the legal ramifications of this?
So for the trust, none. If this is a house that we develop or build and we sell it as a deed-restricted home, an affordable home, that responsibility goes to the current owner paying the mortgage. If the bank forecloses on a piece of property, they take that back, but it's still a deed-restricted property.
Okay, that's what I was getting at.
The bank can't do anything different. They can't say, hey, we want our money, so we're going to sell it at $500,000 instead of $300,000.
Okay,
They
that
don't
was
have
my
that
point.
option. Yeah, that deed restriction sticks to it. As a
Okay,
matter of fact, DHCD writes it in such a way that it's a rider on the mortgage. So no matter what happens, it's stuck to it. It can never go away.
Do you foresee possibly with the deed-restricted mortgage, a bank not issuing a mortgage?
Not at all.
Oh, okay.
No, we've had great response. And when I say we, I mean DHCD and the state. DHCD oversees the various municipalities in this. They don't generally have foreclosures on deed restricted because they're already coming in at an affordable rate. So they're usually pretty well vetted. And furthermore, and I get it, things change all the time, but it doesn't often happen. Before you get to that point, DHCD often steps in and say, hey, we're gonna put it on the market and recover from this.
Thank you.
Or whatever agency is running it. I say DHCD, but there's a dozen alphabet agencies that do this throughout the country.
You good, Harvey? Yes? Okay, I think we have a question or a comment from Jess.
Hi, thanks. This is great. Thank you so much. I appreciate all this work. I know it's a ton of work that you guys have put into this. And I'm generally supportive. I just have a very small question building off of something that Diane said. And it's just about Article 10 itself, which I understand your plan to decouple this from the funding piece, and that makes a lot of sense. This article is simply just to establish the trust itself. And it says estimated cost TBD. And I'm wondering why it still says TBD at this point and not just zero, and is that going to change before town meeting?
It is not going to change before town meeting. I cannot tell you why. I have no control over this aspect of it.
Okay.
There isn't a cost to be determined.
Right.
There is zero
There is no
cost
cost.
from what we're doing now.
Right,
What
so-
we're looking to do is accept the law.
Yeah.
That's the first step. Once that happens, rest assured, I'll be back before you in the spring looking for money from the CPC. And I can't guarantee anything, but I feel very strongly that the CPC will support us in some manner in this.
Okay, yeah,
But
thank you.
yeah,
I
it
figured that
shouldn't
was
say
supposed to be
TBD.
0,
It-
but.
it should say none.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
You all set, Jeff?
I can bring that up, but I'm not sure it's going to change anything. Yeah, thank you.
Do we have any other questions or comments from the Finance Committee? Dave has something?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Thank you for the presentation. It was very, very well done. It was very well received by everybody who I've seen watch the presentation. So it's remarkable how in short time you were able to do that.
Thank you, Dave.
I don't know how else to ask a question other than a hypothetical. So I'm basically going to ask about the way that money shows up from CPC into the trust. So could the ask that I'm going to say is can borrowed money come from the CPC into the trust? For example, if there was a project of $1 million, but you didn't want to give the trust $1 million, but you were willing to give them $100,000 a year for 10 years, are you allowed to use borrowed money to be shipped into the trust from the CPA fund?
My gut says no, but I'm going to, what do you think?
So you're saying would the trust go to the CPC and say, I want $100,000 a year, for example, for the next 10 years? And
Could they bond that money?
Yes.
yeah, I mean, I suppose so. Typically what you do is if something is approved at town meeting, I think in a situation like that, it'd probably be looked at as borrowing because it's.
It would be looked at as borrowing.
It would, well, if there's no bonding, excuse me, if there's no bonding outside of the town, then it's not borrowing. I don't know. It's an unusual setup, and I really don't know. I don't have a good answer for you, but I can check with town accountant.
Yeah, if you could check that, I'd like to hear.
Yeah, we could definitely come up with an answer from Bill Rowe.
I believe we have the town accountant here tonight.
Hey, Bill, what you want to weigh in? No pressure.
You woke him up.
We found something for you to do, Bill.
It's an excellent question, one that I'm not sure I have an answer to. I don't see what the value of it would be, Dave, but I hear where you're coming from. No, it's on the side.
My guess would be no. It's not usually, I'm thinking of borrowing, I think of capital items. This is not a capital item. I would assume that the CPC would make the grant to the trust out of their undesignated fund balance. And then the trust would, if they wanted to buy a property, the trustees would borrow the money.
Okay.
I don't believe that would be authorized to have a CPA borrow.
They couldn't
project.
encumber the money for 10 years on a project like that. It would be something that they'd have, like, here's some money we can give you this year, and
Yeah, I think
have
they're
fun
looking
with
for.
it
I think
or
they're looking
not.
for seed money.
Yeah.
To get started.
Right, but
Yeah,
they couldn't be
start the
encumbered over time on a project with interest.
I think
principal and
I think
interest.
the CPC would give them a grant of for seed money, and then after that they're on their own.
Right.
They would be.
I just wanted to see
they would
if
have
they were
mortgage.
going to be.
They could mortgage their assets.
Yeah.
So forth and so.
I was
the
just
trust
curious
assets.
if they would be obligated to a term over of X amount of dollars over time.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. If you haven't read 4455C yet, there's a lot of it spells it out pretty well. It's written pretty well, the law. So
I could do that.
But if you go onto the Mass Legislature's website, but it's spelled out pretty well.
I got the idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
You good, Dave?
Yeah, thank you.
Do we have any other questions, comments from the Finance Committee? Okay, next we have IGR. You have any questions or comments? None? Okay. Any questions, comments from municipal operations? Seeing, hang on. Did you have a question?
Yeah, Dave Billow, Precinct 4 Municipal Regulations.
Hang on a second.
Just want to say, it sounds like a great.
Hang on a second. Hang on a second. Did you already have a question? I know you got up first. Did you have a question, Jim? Yeah, you were up first. I was trying to get you to come down.
My apologies, I kind of moved to the right. Jim, go ahead.
Jim Guerin, Municipal Operations. The money that's given out here, is this is grants or are these loans?
Are you referring to the money that would come from the Community Preservation Committee?
Yes, to whomever is going
They
to...
would be cash deposits. They wouldn't be loans.
And you're surprised that all the money is going out quickly? You mentioned early on that you were surprised that the money that you had apportioned earlier had gone out quickly.
In the beginning, yes. We weren't surprised, but we didn't know what to expect, to be honest with you, Jim. It was a little bit of a crapshoot. I've never dealt with a pandemic, nor has our current government, to my knowledge, dealt with something like this. So we weren't really sure. To circle back to what you are talking about, if I'm correct, we did ask for the additional 250. We've only spent roughly just over 400,000 currently. So my intent will be to rescind that at Springtown meeting, where that program officially ends in June of 2022.
Well, that's not really where I'm coming from here. Who's vetting the people that are coming up with a handout for this money?
Oh, the Housing Authority.
And
an entity that's well equipped in doing that, mind you.
I no doubt that that's probably correct. But they're building houses, let's say, apartment buildings. Okay. And the money goes out and they do whatever it is they're doing to improve their apartments, and they rent everything out. Who goes back and makes sure that these apartments stay affordable after the first group moves out?
Yeah. So you heard me speak about the town planner has taken on that responsibility as of late. Maybe 4 or 5 months ago, that was taken over by the town planner. DHCD, the Department of Housing and Community Development, does it on a state level, but they rely on the information that the town gets them or the developer offers to them due to the fact that they have an affordable housing restriction on some or all of their apartments. One of the reasons having our town planner and the town take interest in this now is because we were dependent on the developer doing it, which we all know doesn't always work out very well. So now we have a system in place that is monitoring that information, collating it, putting it together so we have a clearer understanding as to what we have and what's available. If a housing trust is established, then they can assist the town planner in doing that hard work.
Currently, the monies that are going into this are coming out of town meeting and out of the CPC.
So there's no money that's gone into a trust as of yet, but our intent will be to start money from the CPC, yes.
Is the town holding any money in trust now that could go into this thing here?
Not to my knowledge, no. There's been no community benefit, if that's what you're talking about, from developers.
Is the town holding any properties that in trust?
There's many properties the town has that are developable, but they do not have any properties in trust, no. They have tax-taken properties.
Yeah, point of information. I think the earlier question was, is there any money held for housing? And the CPA does have a bucket of money that hasn't been spent, but there is a fund.
That's correct.
That has not.
You're talking about the COVID relief fund?
No. Doesn't the CPA have an affordable housing?
Yeah, the CPA requires that we put 10% of our annual gross takings into an account for community housing.
Maybe you can share that balance.
The last I looked, they had something just in excess of $2 million in that fund.
Not in the community housing. I think the number in community housing after the COVID relief was somewhere in the areas of 350. Barry, does that? The last time I looked at the CP2, Bill, do you remember that number off the top of your head? God bless you. Let me bring the mic to you. So, Bill's very good at. I'll bring it over, Jim. You can stay there.
Oh.
Okay, so community housing at the end of fiscal 21 has 289,862. Historic resources, that's another one, is 274. Oh, wait, excuse me, that's not right. Wrong page. Community housing has $321,090 at the end of 21. Historic has 160,048. Open space of 7,558. And the undesignated fund balance, the unreserved undesignated, is 4.3 million, 4,347,000. So.
Mr. Rowe, could you please email that to
Yeah, I
Dave
can
or
send out a
myself, and we'll
CP2.
distribute it to the committees if that's
Part
all
of the
right.
CP2, we're happy to provide.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Is the plan, right now, the town is the owner of a lot of property.
Yes, it is.
I'm not sure that I like the idea of the town being in property development, but that's a story for another day. Is the intent of what I read in the document here that you're going to buy up properties to be used as part of this package?
It would be disingenuous of me to say I have grandiose ideas of buying up properties and developing massive complexes. That is not the focus of the trust, nor is it realistic. The trust, if it passes, will hopefully have starting money of $500,000 at the end of Springtown meeting. And as I say, that's a hope. That's not a guarantee. The trust will look at, and if you analyze towns like Easton, we will be looking to get the ball rolling with what we would consider low-hanging fruit, which is deed restriction, securities, changing a home over to deed restriction due to perhaps, and it's just an example, but there's an elderly person living or a couple living in a house. They don't have anybody to bequeath that house to, but they can't afford to live there because, unfortunately, they've taken mortgages out on it. Well, we can provide assistance for somebody like that, creating a deed restriction and allowing that person to live their days out where they want to, which is in their home.
That sounds like that reverse mortgage business.
No, it's not a reverse mortgage at all. When they pass away, one of two things will happen. The house will be sold with the deed restriction, or it will be bequeathed to the housing trust. We're not paying them to stay in their house. We're simply providing a little bit of assistance to them. And when I say little, I kind of mean that. I'm not going to pay the house off. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying the trust couldn't choose to purchase the house from the tenant and then have them pay rent. I think that is a possibility, but it all comes back to the deed restriction.
That's the thing that bothers me.
Yeah, well, I understand that, but those would be one-on-one situations. That isn't the intent of the trust. The intent of the trust is to assist the town to stay above that absolute minimum 10% marker. And to be honest, I know there's been a lot of rumblings from the state about possibly, I'm not saying it'll happen, but possibly increasing that number from 10%. They bumped that up to 12, we'd be in trouble. We'd be under the mark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So.
okay. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
You all set, Jim? Yes.
Thank you, Jim.
Do we have any other questions or comments from municipal regulations? Okay, please identify yourself for the record.
Yeah, Dave Billow, Precinct 4, Municipal Regulations. Just briefly, I was going to say, this seems like a great tool in the town's toolbox to be smarter and more nimble with housing, and I definitely like the sound of that. And as far as oversight, I did see in the Declaration of Trust that the trustees are appointed for 2-year terms by the Board of Selectmen, or the Select Board, excuse me, and can be removed after hearing for cause. So that seems like a reasonable amount of oversight and ability to turn things over. My question is, you had said one possible usage would be for children of Stoughton residents to move in, be able to stay in town. How would that be handled in a way that was fair, so that it wasn't like an inside track? Do you know how the tenants or the owners would be selected?
It's a very, very good question. So the trust is not allowed by law to discriminate against anybody. So obviously, that child would first and foremost have to qualify financially. That is the one and only requirement that an affordability restriction has, is that you qualify financially. So it doesn't necessarily give preference to Stoughton children. It's an example of some of the things that could happen. And I would think as a Stoughton resident, if you have any even small or distant relation to town government and follow anything at all, you'd say, wait a minute, I think there's something there. And it would certainly give them a leg up in that way because they live here. But we couldn't say, oh, we're going to pick only Stoughton kids. Doesn't work.
Yeah, we just want it to be fair and not like
be nice, but it doesn't work that way.
Kind of insider
right
kind of thing.
No, it really isn't. And it's interesting. So they're called lotteries, is how these things are assigned. Those go through the state, so the trust wouldn't actually have any control over who got it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions or comments?
Mike Harmon, Precinct 8, Municipal Regulations. I'm also president of Presidential Court, so I want to comment about that. We have no plans to change anything. We're actually making a lot of improvements. We have a very healthy waiting list, so I think the fear is probably unwarranted at this time, but hey, things can change. I just wanted to let you know that.
I think that's fantastic. I know that the current deed restriction they have expires in 2029.
Well, we know that. We're working towards that.
And
we're making major improvements, and the threat to, we wouldn't be doing that if we weren't going to stay.
Yeah, obviously, my interest would be to ensure that presidential estates continue to
we
stay
operate on our
affordable.
own. We don't get town
That would be
funding, so
fantastic.
we're pretty sad. So,
yep.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Do we have any other questions or comments? I'm going to get through all the committees because we went through the Finance Committee, so we'll go. Any other muni regs? Any questions or comments from the public? Okay, we'll come back to the Finance Committee.
Question from the public. As
Okay.
a member of the public.
Can you
don't
please
mind.
identify it?
Not as an
identify
elected
yourself,
official, but just as a resident of the town of Stoughton. My name is Bob Mullen, 19 Clover Lane. Could you, Mark, and Barry, great presentation. Appreciate the time and the effort. Could you bring back the composition of the trust? The officers. I just had a clarification. I didn't read for detail on this. Didn't get an opportunity. I noticed that this is just for clarification. Not for or against this. Three of those members, Planning Board, Housing Authority, and SRA, are already members of the CPC. Would these be different positions? Can't be the same person.
It doesn't have to be the same person. Could it be?
I think for separation of
if somebody was
duties,
foolish enough to take on that kind of responsibility, sure, but it's not likely that they'd be the same people, no.
I think you should put something. My suggestion would be, as a resident of this town, is trying to ensure separation of duties in the town government.
That's a great point.
I think you should at least look at that and make sure it's not the same people.
So we had to create, obviously, a composition for the board that was a part of what we were required to do by state legislation. However, that's an excellent point, and the Board of Trustees and the various committees will be the ones picking their members. Yes, the Select Board technically will nominate them, but much like the SRA, the Select Board has a tendency to err on the side, unless it's a very poor decision, to agree with the decision or the nomination that the redevelopment authority makes. And I can only talk about that because Tuesday night we had
Right. All I'm suggesting
Yeah.
is maybe look at that and gives the
No, that's a
the
great
people of the
point.
town,
It's a great point.
Bringing more people from the town for these volunteer positions.
And transparency is everything in this, so that's an
Right,
excellent
it
point,
helped
one that we'll
transparency for
bring
sure.
to
I
the
appreciate
board. Yeah,
your comment.
absolutely.
One last question, though.
Sure.
You mentioned about the trust may be buying some properties.
Possibly. That's an option.
Okay, an option.
Yep.
Now, I did read a little bit that any properties you own don't pay taxes to the town.
No, not true at all.
I thought the trust
No.
does not pay taxes.
No, so it would not really be in the interest of the trust to retain properties unless, of course, it was an apartment complex. But again, we pay taxes just like everybody
You do?
else.
Okay, I
Yeah.
just didn't read that in there. All right, thank you. Thank you
thank
for
you.
allowing me to ask questions. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, comments from the public? Jim, do you have another? Please identify yourself for the record.
Jim Guerin, Precinct 6, Municipal Ops. I'm looking at this and it reminded me of a question I had. I saw in the write-up of the trust that those members up there are going to be special town employees. What does that mean?
I believe most board members are considered special town employees. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong about that.
I don't think that's true.
It's, how do I explain it?
I believe it's like we may be municipal, well, town meeting members aren't municipal employees, but let's say a member of the selectmen or the member of the school committee, they are considered municipal employees, which means you can only, under state law, hold one municipal job at a time. So, like, I could not be on the school committee and work for the school system. I could work, there's exceptions for, like, other types of things, but if you're a special municipal employee, there are certain things that you're allowed to do that you might not be able to do if you were a regular municipal employee. So it's a kind of a status that's created under the like state ethics laws, and I don't remember all the particulars of it, but that's what it is.
Okay, so there's no salary or anything that's,
No.
that's assigned to the thing.
No, although the trust could have, and it is likely, in reality, they should have a paid employee. It would not be any of these members. Yeah, we could hire somebody as a program administrator, but none of these people would be paid. Yeah.
I did see. These 6 people are going to serve. I saw the list of people that are on this, and good neighbors all. In 2 years, they're going to be replaced.
Yes.
Every one of them.
Every one of them. They'll be staggered, to my knowledge. I don't have the technical on the staggering in front of me, but they will be staggered.
Am I going to like the next group as much as
I don't
like
know.
the one this morning?
You tell me. If you don't, fire them. I can't. If I had a crystal ball, I'd help you, but I don't.
Thank you.
Hang on a second.
It is staggered. It's set up so that the board, it's a 2-year term, but every year, half of the board, well, there's 9, so roughly half is replaced every year.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, comments from the public? Any more from municipal regulations, ops, IGR? No. Okay. Any last questions from the Finance Committee? Joel Wolk.
Yeah, Mark, very quick question. That actually this has happened on other committees that I've been on. Let's say that somebody from this board, the planning, FinCom, gets selected for a 2-year term, and at the end of the first year, they leave FinCom. Does that mean they're automatically off the trustees?
Yes, that's correct. They would have to be appointed.
You better make that clear and not that clear in here. It basically says, it says that if that member resigns from the trustees, he gets replaced, but it doesn't say if he resigns from the board.
I'd have to go back through, but I'm pretty sure we accounted for that, Joel.
Okay, because I've had other committees. where
The
that's become a
question
problem.
is who the assignee would be for that appointment. I believe it's a select board. Now, that's not to say that the finance committee couldn't have input like they did in the first place, perhaps make a nomination for said position. But ultimately, as with all the positions, the select board is the final.
Well, I'm assuming it won't
appointing
become
authority.
a factor, but I've had the problem. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, comments? Okay. I'd like to move on. You have any?
I'm good. No,
Okay,
I
great.
just want to thank you all for your time
Thank you
and
for your
and
presentation.
consideration of this.
Okay, we're going to move on to Article 3. Article 3. Oh, hang on.
Land transfer.
Excuse me? Yes.
So my committee could leave before midnight?
We will do Article 4 now.
Just that we have another CPC article that they've got.
We're saving Article 11 for last. Article 4. Oh, they didn't tell you to do that, people?
I got an extra one, I don't know. Yeah.
Whenever you're ready.
Good evening, everybody. Nice to see everybody again. The article in front of you tonight is to discontinue a portion of Page Street. The article serves two purposes, really, and I'll get into the details later on in the presentation. Essentially, it discontinues a portion of Page Street that looks like a piece of triangle property, but it's actually a right-of-way. It's a public way. The second part authorizes the Board of Selectmen to petition the county commissioners for another portion of Page Street that's larger. It's about 37,000 square feet to get that discontinued. It's not a town way. It's a county way. So two parts. Discontinuing a public way, which is a small triangle piece. It's around 5,000 square feet or so. The second part is authorizing the Board of Selectmen to petition the county commissioners to discontinue another part of Page Street, which is a county way. It's not a town way. A little history. In 1956 or so, Route 24 went through. Obviously, everybody knows Route 24. It bisected a lot of these old roads in Stoughton and other towns. Page Street was one of them. When 24 went through, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts laid out a triangle that you can see on your map. It's a little triangle, sort of designed for a little future turnaround if needed, a cul-de-sac if you want to call it, that kind of thing. Page Street essentially got fully reconstructed to the north of where that is shown right there. So the Page Street that you see today, the Page Street in Stoughton that cars travel on, is not the Page Street that you see on your map. There's actually two Page Streets that most people aren't aware of that. The Page Street on your map is unconstructed. There's no roads there. It was at one point in time maybe a car path way in the day, in an ancient way many years ago. It was supposed to be constructed, never did. They reconstructed it north of where it is. The town actually calls that Old Page Street, but it's actually not called Old Page Street. It's actually Page Street. In 2017, there was actually a town meeting articles approved by town meeting to actually auction off that triangle piece of land because they were under the intention that the town owned that piece of land. It was a town property. What happened was there was a full title review done on that property afterwards, and it's actually a right-of-way. After the right-of-way is discontinued, it turns into a town piece of land. So you have to discontinue the right-of-way before you can auction off the triangle piece of land. In 2021, April this year, the abutter on each side of that Page Street, the county way, we petitioned the select board to discontinue the Page Street, the bigger portion, and the triangle. The reason for that, obviously, is it's not being used. It's bisecting his piece of property. He owns approximately 12 acres of land on each side of that. So by discontinuing that road, discontinuing the triangle, it automatically reverts back to the owners on each side of that road. So before this road was ever put in, that person probably owned that land anyways, but they took that land from them way back when. By discontinuing it, just goes back to the owner. This is easy. There's multiple properties that abut this right of way, and they are all owned by the same person, so it's a very easy process. When you have multiple owners, it can get very complicated. It's one owner. The benefit to doing this, obviously, is obviously those parcels get grouped together. They get a much larger buildability to them, right? Because they're not bisected by a road. It allows a developer to construct some sort of building or structure that provides tax revenue to the town. On your property, sorry, the mass is like, it makes it like breathe deep, and I feel like I'm huffing and puffing over here. On your map that you have, the colored map, as you can see, the pink is all one ownership. One person owns it. This is on the easterly side of Route 24. Obviously, there's no connection through 24 unless you go through the real Page Street, which is just north of this. So this is sort of like a landlocked piece of property. The only access to this is through Avon. And again, like I said, this is not built. It's not a built road that we utilize today. It's a public way, county way, but it's like a paper street where there's nothing there. And that's pretty much this article in a nutshell.
We have any questions or comments from the Finance Committee? John?
So, Mark, the little triangle piece you said that you were looking to get rid of that before, but the town still owns it. The town still owns this property. So you're saying that if it's just a paper street or whatever, that's going to revert to the other owners. In this case, it's all one big company. Right. And is this little piece of this little triangle? Are you selling that to him?
Yeah. So the triangle is different than Page Street. Page Street's actually the county layout. The town. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I know. I apologize for that. Page Street's a county way. The only thing we're getting involved is allowing the selectmen to petition the county commissioners to discontinue it. So the county commissioners will discontinue that.
All right, so that's not our road now?
No.
Okay.
We're just authorizing the selectmen to go through that process.
All right.
Okay, so really, the reason, if you flip your sheet on the back, I highlighted the triangle piece because that's really kind of like why we're here, the triangle piece. And
Yep.
we were here in 2017 essentially for the same thing, but through the title search, our council found out that it's actually a right-of-way. So we can't just go auction off a right-of-way without discontinuing the right-of-way first. Once you discontinue the right-of-way, then it reverts back to a town-owned piece of property that we can dispose of.
So the little triangle was a right-of-way?
Yeah. Yep,
Okay.
exactly.
Now, once it gets to that, you have to auction that, right? You can't just sell it.
Yeah, I
You
believe you
actually
have to
have to
auction
auction it off.
Correct.
Obviously, from the position, there's only one person that it would really.
Right. Exactly.
All right. All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Any other questions or comments? I think Elliot had a question.
Yeah, I did, thank you. I'm a little bit confused here on this purple sheet, purple and green. You got 2 page streets. What did I miss here?
Exactly. I know. It is a very confusing situation. We do have 2 page streets in Stoughton. One is constructed.
Page 1 and page 2?
yeah, page 1 and page 2. The page on the bottom, we call it Old Page Street. And if you go on the other side of Route 24, you'll see, if you look at our GIS and all that, it says Old Page Street. So at one time, it actually continued right through 24. And then it merges back into...
Well, I can understand the page street like getting discontinuous and all that. But on this one here, I see a page street here and a page street up here. Is that what you were talking about, referring?
That's exactly what I'm talking about, yep.
Thank you. I guess.
You good, Elliot? Any other questions or comments from members of the finance? Diane?
Thanks, Mark. I'm sure the gentleman that owns the other properties is probably going to be the only one bidding on this, because it's obviously not that big. So it will be included now in his tax base?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you that
When he purchases, when this person purchases this, it will be now incorporated into his taxes. He'll pay taxes on that.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
But my main question was, what was the right-of-way, and how could we get rid of it? Was it a railroad line?
No, so at one point in time, that's a great question.
I just don't want somebody to come back and say that's our right-of-way and you can't get rid of it.
No, this is one thing we've had many attorneys look at and do a title search on. The reason for the triangle came after the Page Street. And it was when Route 24 came through and cut the Page Street off. They were thinking ahead and saying, well, you can't just have a road ending. You need an area to turn around for vehicles if you build that. That's why the Commonwealth of Massachusetts took that on behalf of the town of Stoughton. So it's a right-of-way on behalf of the town of Stoughton.
Okay.
And it was just never built for the cul-de-sac,
All right.
obviously.
I just wanted to make sure it wasn't, transmission lines or
Yep.
that type of stuff. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments from the Finance Committee? I have a comment on this. It was stated that perhaps this property was owned by this person years ago before Route 24 came through. But my search right now shows that these properties were all bought after Route 24 came through. Route 24 came through in, I don't know, the 50s or something. These properties were all bought in the late 90s or the early 2000s. So this person didn't have the property when the Route 24 came through, but that's what was stated. So I just wanted to clarify that.
What I meant was not necessarily this person, but that was one chunk of property before Route 24 before Page Street was there, and then when Page Street came through, they obviously took it from that property owner.
So some other person got their property cut up, and now the modern day person would.
Exactly. It was most likely not the person you see on the plan.
Well, it's not this person. I just looked up when the property was sold. But thank you very much for the clarification. Do we have any questions from IGR? Janice, you want to come down and state your name for the record?
Okay. I have a question. There's 2 Page Streets, and looking at the purple land, that's all owned by a single landowner. And the purpose of this article is to make the triangle that the Board of Selectmen can give it back to the county. Is that right?
No. So what the purpose of this article is to discontinue, the triangle is actually a right-of-way.
Okay, so it
it's like a road.
discontinues the right-of-way.
Discontinues the right-of-way, yep.
So the green Page Street on here is a paper street?
It's a county right-of-way that is not constructed, so it's like a paper street.
It's like a paper street. So what happens to that? Where does that paper street go to?
So that is what this article authorizes the selectmen to petition the county commissioners, who can then discontinue that road.
So they discontinue it. Is it then going to be sold to the purple owner?
County ways are different than town ways. In this situation, the way that way was taken, the way it was created, when you discontinue that county way, it reverts back to the abutters on each side. It's sort of like a private way where the abutters on each side own to the middle. If you got rid of the private way, it would just go back.
It just goes back to,
yeah,
to the company that owns the purple land.
to the people on each side.
To the people on either side, and
Yeah.
then in theory they would buy the triangle.
In theory, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
To follow up on that.
Anybody
Mark.
else on this side?
So since the town owns the triangle, which is the right-of-way, they would also get half of that paper street that disappears. That would revert to the town.
No, not the way. That's a great question.
Well, of course it is, because you just told me it
Yeah.
goes to the abutters, and the town is an abutter,
Yeah,
so it should get
that-
half of that road.
And I asked the same question. In that situation, it does not go back to the town, but based on the way Page Street was written up and taken. And it's more of a legal question, but council went through and analyzed that. I asked the same exact question. Well, I mean, hey. Yeah, you could, drive it up, right? Exactly.
Do we have any other questions from IGR? Any questions from municipal ops? Hearing none. Any questions or comments from municipal regulations? I have another final question on this, unless someone else has another question. How does this benefit the town?
It's only going to benefit the town when, first of all, you get the increased tax revenue when you get rid of the land that will get added to the abutters land. So you will get taxed on land. The big benefit would be for potential development on that property in the future, the tax revenue we would get from that.
All right, thank you very much. Any other questions or comments from the Finance Committee? Any questions or comments from the public?
Mark, did you have a question?
I think
Go ahead, come on down.
Dwight McCarron, 524 Highland Street, Historical Commission. If I understand correctly, is that the land that's still paved? Because Old Page comes down, then hooks back out on the other side of Maltby's, but it used to continue straight down to where the North train station was way back in the day, and it's new enough so if you look in the woods, it's still paved.
This is on the east side of Route 24 going towards Avon. Oh, geez.
Right, it's cut off, but
Yeah.
it used to go, Old Page came down, instead of hooking back out the way it does now, it used to go straight,
Right.
down to the North Stoughton train station, I believe on this road that you're talking about. So that the train station was on the end of what we now called Old Page.
There could be old pavement underneath there, but right now, if you look at the aerial imagery, there's all trees, it's all wooded, it's not being utilized at all.
Well, I understand, but if you actually go in and, it's just interesting that it is paved so that the trees actually don't grow up out of it. It has litter that comes on it and it goes right down behind that, what is it, trucking firm?
In the back there, yep, I know exactly what you're talking about. Right.
That was the original Page Street way
Right.
back in the day.
Right.
So it's not
Is that it right there?
anyone owned that for recorded history, because that was the town way. When you go new Page.
It was actually a county way, if you can believe it. Yeah, right. Yes, exactly. I learned about that road. Yes, yes.
So you can see the road in there, so but this doesn't change with the wisdom of whether you want to do it, but it's got an
To
interesting
be honest with you,
history.
Dwight, I did not realize it was paved, because when you look at the aerial imagery, it looks like it's all wooded, because it's been so long. you
Right,
know?
well, if you walk in, you find the ruins of the old train station,
Yep.
and Old Page used to come right down next to that train station, and it was recent enough so that it's paved right back up to 24.
Yep.
The remnants of paving, you can see it because it's leaf litter, so I'm just throwing that in as sort of interesting historical side note.
Appreciate it, Dwight, thank you.
So there's paving in there? Is that what?
Thank you, Dwight.
Is that what? I just looked it up on Google Maps to try to see the paving. I was just kind of curious.
Well, it's, but
You can't see you can't see it from
side,
there.
but they actually, the only
Well,
thing
there's
that
trees.
grows up out of the paving are little saplings. So, but if you
Right.
ever walk in there, it's not easy, but you will find a old paved road
That's underneath all
covered
that.
with stuff.
Yeah,
This is a historical road then?
it is very old, yeah. It's not historical, it's
Thank you.
an old road.
Mark Zamadian, 5 Low Avenue. Just one quick question. If we do this, we give up any leverage we have in that area. What's the impetus for that for us?
Well, right now, again, we're talking about the triangle,
Yep.
not the county way.
I am.
So there's really not much we can do with that triangle, in my opinion.
Well, you're right, except that it holds some value to a developer that wants to do some work up there, which would generally be great.
Right.
But we have other issues in town that could be addressed. If we pass this, we lose that leverage to address those other issues.
Well, there really is no access to that triangle piece.
Doesn't
of land.
matter, does it?
So-
He needs the triangle.
He needs it, so it could benefit the town from this way. We could generate revenue from the triangle, and then we generate revenue from whatever building he puts on that piece of property. If I'm a developer, I'm trying to put a nice big building on the side of 24, and the town's gonna get a lot of
That's
tax
true.
revenue from that.
And I agree with you, but this triangle represents leverage for another issue we're having elsewhere.
It's a 5,000 square foot triangle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And we're talking about a 3,000 square foot area
There's also
that we require as a town
there's
for
also
other purposes.
There's also an easement that goes through the triangle, so.
Just saying, if we approve this, we lose that leverage.
In my professional opinion, the
There's no
triangle's not
impetus.
usable.
There's no impetus for the developer to say, sure, let me help you out on this because you helped me with this. Has that conversation been had with the developer?
This, again, I'm talking about the property. This was a select board article.
Yep,
I'm not sure if
I
the
get
developers
that.
come in and talked to the select board about that. I'm discussing the property and how this all works.
And I'm making
I have never had
FinCom
a-
aware that this property currently is leverage for the town, in my opinion.
Okay?
And if we do this now, we lose that leverage.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, comments from any of the committees, Finance Committee or Mr. Anzavini?
Is all this other property here, is that undeveloped now, Mark? Is
Yes.
that all undeveloped?
All that property is undeveloped.
Okay.
Everything, the pink and the green.
All right, thanks. Good. Who-
I don't know. No idea.
I guess there's no one else from the public. Are you from the public?
No, I'm just saying, anybody else from the public? Just want to make sure you asked it last call. Okay.
Thank you. No other questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Tisdale.
All right, you're welcome.
I think we have Article 3 next. Municipal Ops has nothing else tonight, so.
Stephanie?
If you want to make a motion to adjourn, before you do that, could you make? Yes, they will have articles tomorrow, so you would need to make.
Cynthia, before you leave, hang on, please.
You want to talk to Stephanie about that, and they can continue their public hearing then till tomorrow?
Yeah, that's all they have to do is make a motion to continue, right?
Correct.
They need to continue it to a specific date and time and place.
Okay, could you make that, someone make the motion from Uni Ops?
Heidi Tucker, Municipal Operations. I'd like to make a motion that we continue our meeting tomorrow, November 3rd at 7 o'clock. November 4th, sorry.
7 o'clock.
All in favor?
Bob, you want to clarify that. They're not continuing their meeting. They're continuing the public hearing to 7 o'clock p.m., November 4th, at Stoughton High School Auditorium.
So moved.
Aye. Motion to adjourn? We're adjourned.
Thank you all for your support. Appreciate it.
We ready to go for Article 3? Are they ready? Are they good? Okay, up next we have Article 3. Do we have any presentation for Article 3? Would you like to cover Article 3?
This is an article from the Conservation Commission for that piece of property on Washington Street. The Conservation Commission actually voted to dismiss this article recently, so this article will be dismissed at town meeting.
Could you have them send a notice that they intend to dismiss this?
Yes.
So we can just put it in with our files, that's all?
Yep, and I spoke with Jerry today about that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any questions or comments from the Finance Committee? None. Questions or comments from IGR?
Public?
Questions or comments from Uni-Regs? Questions or comments from the public on Article 3? Okay. Anybody from the public want to comment or have questions on Article 3? Okay. We'll move to Article 11. I believe that all the business for IGR and Muni Regs is completed for the evening, so if they want to
Make a
motion to continue their public hearing till tomorrow.
I'd like to make a motion for the Intergovernmental Relations Committee to continue the public meeting to November 4th at 7 p.m. at Stoughton High School.
Okay, unanimous. Thank you all. You all set? Okay, come on over.
My goal is to keep this simple, make it fast.
Can I get a motion to continue our public? All right, so we have a motion to continue our public hearing till Thursday, November 4th at 7 p.m. at Stoughton High School Auditorium. And second, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Thank you all. Appreciate it. See you tomorrow night.
Get a motion to adjourn our meeting till tomorrow? Aye.
Okay, they adjourn. Thank you.
Article 11. Hire a consultant to evaluate the barn on West Street.
Hi, I'm Dwight McCarron of the Historical Commission that we proposed this. This is a barn on West Street. Hurley's originally, we bought it from McNamara's maybe 20 years ago. Ed was leasing it, well, still leases it, and is sort of a caretaker of it. The barn, it's a nice old barn, but it's starting to fall apart. And the roof was in fairly good shape until just within the last year and a half. That front facade fell off. As you can see, ripped some of the roofing off it. The part to the left is very sound. That's the newer construction. The middle part looks like it's jury rigged from really old peg barn boards. but I think it was reconstructed from old barn boards, not a 1700 construction. Then at the end, next to Maureen Gibbons' house, there's a milk room that's probably can't be saved. It's got a tree through a hole in the roof. All of this, there it is there, that part, that may not be able to be saved. What the proposal is fairly simple, to ask for $20,000 to hire a consultant to come in, analyze the structure, tell us what's sound, tell us what repairs need to be made just to keep it from falling in, and go from there. As for possible future use, the inside, the left-hand side, has the stalls from an old dairy operation that the Hurleys ran. With the Historical Society actually had a meeting at that barn 12 years ago, attended by many of the Hurley members of the Hurley family. So you could have a barn museum, or a farm museum, in which you kept some old equipment that's building up, not enough to accommodate all that's in Charlie McNamara's backyard, but that's one possible use. The second possible use is a base of operations for community farming, because this abuts many acres of pasture, conservation land that's, as you can see there. This is an entrance to the Bird Street Conservation Area. So given the fact that it actually has quite a bit of parking, because they paved behind the barn at one point when they planned to make a miniature golf course in there. So you could actually park 25 cars before you go out, and so you see the paving on the left there. There's a lot of space, and those trails go directly into the Bird Street Conservation Area via that paved path. So to keep it simple, just to save this barn or find out what's going on with it, for him to say, look, you have to shore up this end, you have to fix this roof, make recommendations, and then depending on what he recommends, we'd be coming back for the repairs or the demolition, or it depends on what the consultant tells us.
To this, this is Mark Zamanian, Chair of the CPC. We voted from the Community Preservation Committee unanimously to support this article. And there was some question, well, why are we doing this? And one thing that I noticed in the past with the CPC is because of that question, we didn't do anything. Dwight has taken on the responsibility of sort of leading the charge on this. And one of the things that he's been asked to do is to present possible usages for the barn. I think and I think the CPC has done some incredible work. Unfortunately, sometimes we've made the mistake of not really having a goal in mind, an end goal, so to speak. And I think that this is showing not only finance, but the town, that the CPC is very serious about the end game here. I'll give you a great example. We have another application that came in for a piece of land, and that applicant actually went back to the drawing board to come up with a full scope and understanding as to what the land will be used for, and we're very excited to see that end plan. This is being done because the CPC has an interest in presenting the town with completed projects, something that I think will go a long way in the town for what the CPC does for us. And we have many, but we admittedly have some that have struggled a little bit. So I was in support of this because, frankly, we either need to repair it or tear it down. And the only way to know is to get this $20,000.
Is that the whole presentation? Okay, great. Any questions or comments from the Finance Committee? We have Chet Collins.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, why are we spending $20,000 to evaluate a barn that's fallen down? I visited the site numerous times, and to me, it should be torn down. Second of all, we have a town engineer, we have a building inspector that can do the same job to evaluate that building and take it down or rebuild it. If you rebuild it, you're going to have to buy lumber, like sawn wood from some other barns from New England or down south or whatever to reconstruct it. Second of all, I know people in that area up there do not like to have development. We own the property. It's 55 acres. Sell that property and build houses up there. We can get some revenue in this town. I know people up in that area don't like that idea, but that's my opinion. I don't think we should be spending $20,000 to evaluate a barn that we already know it's falling apart, that we're not going to be able to fix, and we're not going to put a community garden up there because we tried doing that at Cape and Reynolds, and what's that, 3 years now? We haven't built a dog park or a community garden.
6 years. But it's actually
I'm
in process now. Cape and Reynolds has been 6 years
Well, whatever.
since we approved it, yes.
It's been a long time.
But
So-
it has.
But
And
my point is,
it's getting done now. The plans have been
my
approved.
point is, we don't need another community garden. We don't need a museum for farm apparatus because we're going to get it from. We're going to get the farm tractors. We're going to get the plows, all this stuff that they used to do. Where are you going to get those?
Well-
It's going to cost us more money.
Charlie McNamara's backyard, if you take a look at it.
Yeah, but we're always
is a
paying
farm,
McNamara
is a-
for everything.
but to go to your other point, when you're saying sell that land, that's all conservation land. So if the town starts selling conservation land for house lots, I mean, you got a scoop there. That's never been done, and I don't believe it's going to be done.
Is that all 55 acres?
Yes.
All
Con-
55 acres is
it's part
conservation
of
land?
It's part of the Bird Street Conservation Area.
Okay, then I stand corrected. I'm sorry. I didn't
And
know that was
The other
conservation land.
complicating thing about the barn is at least a third of it is solid, good, not falling in at all. The middle part is shaky and needs to be evaluated. The right-hand part may well have to come down. But we need a consultant to tell us what to do, in my humble opinion.
You don't think that our building inspector can do that?
No.
Town engineer?
I mean, it's a complicated analysis of an old structure with 3 different elements, and you really need someone with experience in old, what do you call it, lintel pegged,
Yeah.
pegged wood and
Yeah.
those pieces.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like a Sawzall project. And actually, I have spoken to some barn restorers, and one of the things, if we're able to get the money to do this, that we could do, is if there is a section of this barn that's savable, we would save it. However, I'd want to bring somebody in that knows how to take the other parts apart and save that wood. That wood is valuable. This could become, I mean, you're talking about 55 acres, but a good portion of that land can be used for agriculture. Everybody in the room must know the importance of agriculture locally that we are now facing. We often find shelves empty at the stores. I'm not a big fan of spending wasted money, so to speak, but I think in this case, this barn justifies the spending. Well, that's my opinion, Chet. I understand what yours is. But my opinion is by spending this money, it gives me a clear path as to the future of this barn. And if we're told, hey, it should come down, well, then I want somebody qualified to take it apart and save that wood, because that wood is important.
We have any other, is that, you good, Chet?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you have any other questions from the
I
Finance
just
Committee?
have-
Harvey?
I have just a quick question for you. In regards to conservation land, you stated a couple of times it's agricultural land, and it could be farmed. Are we able to lease conservation land? And the reason I say is basically like Ward's Berry Farm. He leases from Kendall Corporation.
Well, in this case, Ed McNamara claims that he was given a lifetime lease on the land when he sold it to the town 20 years ago. He has been taking hay off it up until the point that he sold his horse farm.
Mm.
He's the one who has a lot of junk in there. Given the fact that we have leased it, at least unofficially, to him, I think you're asking an excellent question. If you had a going agricultural concern that made an offer on that land to use it, I mean, it's above my pay grade to make that decision, but I certainly think it should be
Well, I
considered
know
seriously.
that there's another lot, I'm pretty sure there's another lot up there that the town bought from McNamara back when we had a problem with his getting bullets through his greenhouses. And it seems like a certain sporting organization in this town fronted $50,000 towards the town purchasing a portion of that land from him to do away with his complaints and the fact, and until they traced down the source of where all this ammunition was coming from. But that's neither here nor there. But so what I'm getting at is there are two parcels of land that we own from McNamara. Is that correct?
Well, the Libby purchase, though, which is a lot where the Libby playground is, that was purchased from Ed McNamara, I believe, in our lifetime here, those of us who are in town government. And that's a big chunk.
Yeah.
Just that's because we're bullets. I think the threat was to develop that, and it would have cut our current conservation land right in two. So that was before we had CPC, but the town and volunteers dug up the money, and we bought that land and now have a beautiful playground there, and our trails go all the way through it. So 2 big parcels from Ed McNamara were purchased.
Okay.
And if, Harvey, if I could follow up with what I believe was your first question, the CPA does allow the CPC, and when I say CPA, I mean the state statute does allow the CPC to lease agricultural land out.
Okay, well, I mean, from the picture I saw of the barn, and I'm not an expert, and already through his statement, is one part is condemned. One part is questionable. You have one part that's good or salvageable. And I would rather see, if you're going to spend money, rather see you take down the 2 parts that aren't salvageable, salvage the wood, and use that to shore up the part that is good. And then you'd have, if you did lease the land, the lessee would have someplace to store their equipment. But to say you're going to spend $20,000 to have somebody come in and say, that's got to come down, and that's, I don't know, it's a 50-50, which we know already. Basically, save you 20 grand and put it towards your reconstruction of Part A that's still good. That's just my opinion.
So, Harvey, I couldn't agree more with you, but this is part of the frustration of working with. If we need to know what kind of, or what part, or what portion of this building is savable and what isn't. I don't like spending $20,000 on that, but that's what it costs in municipal world. So we made a decision, rather than continuing to talk about it until it fell down, which eventually it would, although it's pretty strong. It's gone through quite a bit. But let's, use the pot or get off of it. That's sort of the attitude we took, and the CPC said, yeah, no, I want to see what happens here.
Okay, thank you.
John?
Good evening, gentlemen.
John?
Well, it stood up to the last storm we just had, didn't it?
Yes, it did.
All right. I have no idea if you would have any guess, if you spent the $20,000 just to see what was going, what do you think the cost would be to follow through with that? Any idea? If you could shore up the good one and take down the other little piece, I mean, any idea at all?
No, and that is part of the reason we're getting this evaluation. We don't have a clue what it would cost. It is entirely likely that some of this barn, although may not be able to stay as a structure, could be, the wood can be reclaimed. That is a big source of income right now. There's tin on that roof that will turn money. Perhaps some of it can be used to shore up or repair other parts of the building. When we talked about this, I even went as far as saying, hey, if we have to take it down, maybe we can use some timbers to create another building. That would also be a viable option. Without the 20 grand, we're never going to know when we're going to watch it fall in. Whether it takes 50 years or 20, that's what's going to happen. So
I didn't know if you might have had, are we looking at, 100? We looking at $1 million?
Wild speculations.
Yeah. All right.
I'm sorry.
I think a lot of that comes from whether they decide that it needs to be demoed, one cost, as opposed to shoring up. So it's the middle piece with the historic timbers that are really old, but that's the shaky part of the barn, and that's where I feel more comfortable having experts look at it and say, nice, but it's gotta go. I mean, there are organizations in New Hampshire that preserve barns or send out consultants to tell you whether a barn's worth conserving or not, so.
And I want to add that both Dwight and myself have been out to that site. I am a developer. I had many of the similar or same concerns that Dwight did, but neither of us are qualified antique barn specialists, so.
All right.
I don't feel I'm prepared to make that kind of a statement. I think Dwight probably feels the same way.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
But also, anyone who's curious, you can drive out there, pull in the driveway right in front of it next to Maureen Gibbons' house, walk in, take a look at it. I'd recommend keep on right on going into the Bird Street trails that go on forever, but that's just me.
I think, Eric, you have a question?
Thank you. Just going to ask because I'm not familiar with the process, because it looks like you're asking for a consultant to essentially give you a full menu of options that can be done, right? So I'm just curious, who's then selecting from that menu and then ultimately like making the final determination what's going to happen with the property? Is that CPC selecting it and then asking, us to go with that, and then if we say no, you select another option, and we try until we all agree on one? I just don't know the process.
The Historical Commission is the petitioner here to the CPC,
Mhm.
so the report would be made to the Historical Commission, and then it's likely whatever we decided that we needed to do or should be done, we would go back to the CPC to ask for money to demo it, shore it up, do X, Y, and Z.
So the technical part of it does get done with historical. However, it is important to note that any resident can come to a CPC meeting when this is being aired, and we will accept public comment. I've never not. It's important to us that we get a sense from the public, whether it be negative or positive, as to what they feel is important to have happen with this barn. These pieces here that we're talking about, it's important that the entity that has the greatest knowledge, which is Historical Society, weighs in first and foremost, makes their recommendations to the CPC, at which point we'll be asking the public for their opinion of this.
Got it. Thank you. It's good for me to think ahead a few steps.
We have any other questions, comments? Jess?
Very quickly, how does the $20,000 determined, and what exactly do we get for that? Because I think part of the concern here is, like, we know we authorize $750,000 for a school feasibility study. We get an entire package of materials and everything else. This just says $20,000 for an expert opinion, and I think people are uncomfortable with the idea that you're just going to get a walk through, okay, this has to be condemned, here's your 20 grand check. So
It will go out for bid. So there'll be a proposal made for a consultant to do X, Y, and Z, and then the consultants will put their bids in. We will take the lowest bid. So if we're lucky, we will not be spending $20,000, but that's why it's up to $20,000.
yeah, I'm just asking how you determined the 20,000 as opposed to 5,000 or 100,000 that you needed to
We
get this
based
going.
it on prior appraisals and what we felt this would fall under. We figured 20 is going to be more than enough. I don't anticipate spending $20,000 on this, but you don't know what they'll come back with for prices. It will go through normal procurement, and that's how the low bid
Have
will
you
be
talked
done.
with specific people about it? I mean, just to,
I'm sorry, could you?
have you talked with specific people about it already? Like, have you already had somebody come through and?
So I have not had anybody come out, but I do know a barn restorer that tends to take these types of things apart or repair them, and he definitely showed an interest.
Can you tell
He
me the-
isn't
can
a
you tell me the name?
qualified gentleman that could do an analysis of the building, though. His job is more structural, taking it apart.
And I have reached out to the point of frustration 4 or 5 times to the office of such restoring in Massachusetts, asking for someone to come out, and there has to be a problem in that office, because over and over I've not had calls returned or promised they would be returned. So I got so frustrated with that, I stopped.
Okay, and then last question, do you know the actual age of the barn as currently constructed?
The best part was built, I believe, in the early 20th century by the Hurleys. The middle part is what we're not sure about. I suspect that when they built that new part, they've salvaged wood from an old gay barn, because the gays lived there in the 1700s, that they salvaged these peg beams, put them together just to extend the part of the barn that was going to hold hay, because you didn't need the stalls, it was just open. And then the third thing, the milk room was built, I believe, when the McNamara's owned it. So early 1920s for the new part of the barn, but I believe at the same time that's when they pieced together the middle part. But talking to Ed, it happened before his time. Talking to the Hurleys, I haven't gotten an answer on that, but I would like to know the answer to that too.
So the 1920s is the stable part of the barn?
I believe so.
Okay. And that counts as historical here?
Well, yes. I mean, they remembered, just for historical fact, the Hurleys told me when the men on the CCC during the Depression came and built that stone wall along Ames Pond, they would come up to their spring and for lunch and drink their water, and that each year the Hurleys would take more fill from their farm down.
I'm just wondering if there's a cutoff of time for what counts as historical for the town, and that's all.
No, there is no cutoff.
Interesting.
It's
Okay.
sort of in the educated opinion of the Historical Commission. Now, if you were to go by the age of those timbers in the middle part.
Yeah, I understand that
it's
those
like
were
historical
1700s
wood,
and all. I get that. I just was curious if there was actually a determining age that mattered here. Thank you.
You good? Do we have any other questions, comments from the Finance Committee? Dave?
Is this coming out of the historical part of the CPC?
Yeah.
Okay.
It could be,
I mean,
it would likely be
the-
paid out of historical, but it could also be
could come
paid
out
out
of
of
the
undesignated.
undesignated,
Yeah,
yeah.
the key thing to note is that it is being paid in cash.
Yeah.
Obviously.
And it would be a cash.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Dave?
Thank you for presenting. I have a hard time when I'm asked to get behind a project without really the end game in mind of where we're going with it. Like, what is are we looking to make it like an artifact like Cape and Reynolds up there? Are we looking to make it like a Plymouth plantation? Like, where are we trying to take this before we even make the first investment? Because then, you start to see like almost like this drip, drip, drip of more and more money having to be sucked into something just for the mere fact that it's there. I think it's much easier when somebody knows, oh, we're doing this because somebody's got this great idea, and here's and there's like a movement getting behind it, so that all these people will take their families, kids, and everything to enjoy their time at this town-owned artifact.
I absolutely agree with you, Dave. The struggle with this is because I don't know how much of the building is savable, I can't really estimate what I'm going to do with it. In other words, if 2/3 of this building was to come down, that changes my plan. In my opinion, and this is just my opinion as a member, it is not representative of the CPC, I would like to see this spot used in an agricultural fashion. There's a call for it, there's a need for it, and I think that would benefit the town.
I just believe that if you have a vision for what it is you're trying to ask for an investment, it goes a much longer way in getting the votes you need to get it passed, because you're asking for taxpayer money for another thing that we own, for another Randolph Savings, for another Cape and Reynolds, for another
I
on
hear,
and on, but it becomes just a stack of things that we just happen to own.
I hear you, Dave, and I agree with you as a general rule of thumb, but without knowing the condition of the building and how much can be saved, I can't tell you. What if it all comes down? Maybe we change our plans and do something completely different
Right, but
with
without an idea.
This 20 is the only thing I have to figure out what we can do with
Yeah,
this
but doesn't
property.
it make sense that maybe it doesn't need any more investment because there are no ideas for it to begin with?
Then
Like
we
if it
tear
was
it.
to
Then
be-
we
Well,
tear
that-
it down.
You want ideas?
Yeah, I want ideas.
That becomes a source house for the community farms that will be in back, where you've got 10, 20, 30 acres of decently arable land. You put up deer fences. It's actually better land than other community gardens. I'll tell you, it's better land than Cape and Reynolds, better land than on Pine Street. I mean, it's potentially agricultural land for community farms. What do you call them? Like the farms they have in Easton and Sharon, community gardens. So it's a wonderful site for community gardens. It has parking, it has moderate security, and that could be your place where you stored machinery, road
So it's almost
tillers.
like, it sounds then like the idea is like a precinct 4 version of the Cape and Reynolds idea, because that's what they wanted to do there.
No,
Isn't it?
Cape and Reynolds
And
was
is Cape and-
historical in
is
nature.
Is Cape and Reynolds older than the barn on West?
Well, Cape and Reynolds, the first house was built in 1757, most of which got torn down. So Cape and Reynolds is not as old as the house next to it, Marine Gibbons' house that went with that farm, but Cape and Reynolds may be as old or older than the barn itself.
Right. In comparison to the West Street barn.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The Cape and Reynolds barn may be a bit older than
the project
barn
here.
at West Street.
Right. But when we're looking at a barn that's in better shape than this barn, I think. Cape and Reynolds, I don't know. I mean, it's.
Well, the barn's in good shape at
It's
Cape
in
and Reynolds.
reasonably good shape. It's older, but we don't have any programming ideas
But,
on
you
Cape
know,
and Reynolds. So
right.
why?
But all we can fit at the Cape and Reynolds is a small community garden area. It doesn't have the land. This has an incredible amount of agricultural land behind it. And that, to me, is the linchpin, if you will.
So
It's just
the
my
land-
opinion.
the land when
It's
you
going
go-
to be agricultural. We just don't know how.
The fields,
yet.
when you go around the corner to your left on West Street, that open field that goes way in is part of the fields that go with this barn, as is another 10 acres up back. So there's probably right there cleared 20 acres of land that would either grow hay or with some effort you could put in community gardens.
So why don't we just forklift the Cape and Reynolds barn and bring it over to West Street?
Cape and Reynolds doesn't have the land.
We don't deal in science fiction.
No, I'm saying.
Yeah, and I can't pick a barn up and move it, so. Nice
All right.
thought, though.
All right, thank you.
You good, Dave?
I'm good.
Excellent. Any more questions from the Finance Committee? Questions or comments from the public? Hearing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
for
you, and
listening
thank you for your consideration.
Any other matters?
Do you have any other matters for the Finance Committee tonight? Anything you guys want to talk about?
No other matters.
No other matters.
All right,
Okay.
then, Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to continue this public hearing to the Stoughton High School Auditorium at 7 p.m. on November 4th.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Mr. Chairman, I'd move that we adjourn the meeting for this evening.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
And that's at 10:50. We're in the same day.
Thanks. Have a great night.